Well, hello to the people joining me for the David 67 live stream of the Thursday, the 27th of August. A few of you have already made some comments in the comment section, so lots of people have joined in nice and early, which is really good. Great to have you on, Alison Timpany. No, champions 56. No Rangers, no Huns in Europe. Well, I think there are a few German teams in Europe, if you want to use the old-fashioned definition, but certainly Rangers got knocked out on penalties after what I'm told was a rather miserable performance. Great to have you on, James Smith. Your 8 teams for the draw tomorrow: AZ, Bayer Leverkusen, Sparta Prague, Union Saint-Gilloise, Hoffenheim, Bournemouth, Lillestrøm, Hapoel Beersheva. One or two potentially controversial ties there. I think certainly would be great for Celtic to draw an English team or two in the draw, Bournemouth and Sunderland. I think the two options that we could draw. I think having a tie against an Israeli club could cause one or two controversial problems with banners and UEFA guidelines and stuff, but we get who we get. And certainly looking at the pots, Celtic are said to be definitely in pot 2 for tomorrow. There are going to be some relatively weak teams in pot 1 and some very difficult, strong teams in pot 3 and 4. One of the snags or things with the this pots is all based on the UEFA coefficients, and quite often in the Europa League and in the Conference League, which we're not in, but Hearts are. I'm not sure about Hibs. They were playing this evening. So we'll find out tomorrow. I think the draw is live at 12 noon. Great to have you on. Plunge 274. Rangers, sadly for Scottish football, got knocked out because it will even more mess up and bring down Scotland's coefficient, which obviously has a knock-on effect for Champions League qualifying over the next few seasons. Also means there'll be less and less Scottish teams in Europe, which makes it harder and harder to get back into the higher echelons of Europe. But I actually was, in terms of the fact that Rangers are getting knocked out, I'm very happy. And the fact that that McInnes got not beaten out was also really good. Hail, hail to the champions. You're quite right, Michael Ross. We're champions of Scotland all the way through to next May at the very least, and I think we're going to win the title this year. Plunge 274 saying at least LASK are a good side, although they will get found out in the Champions League. I think if they play with that kind of commitment, particularly in their home legs, I think, and it did seem to me that the pitch was a wee bit difficult to play on. There did appear to be quite a lot of ruts and bumps and stuff. But anyway, that's no excuse. Celtic played absolutely abysmally. But I think LASK could have an option or a chance of getting in the lower echelons and to get into the knockout phase. So Michael Ross, you're quite right. There is nothing else for Rangers to go into. There isn't a level below the Conference League, so that's them out of Europe. It maybe gives them actually a chance to resurrect their season and so on. Evening to you as well, Hugh Jameson. You say you've got your flight and accommodation booked for Frankfurt next May. Well, those may well be more expensive as Celtic in the final, I think. Celtic really got their act together and had 3 or 4 really good players over the last 7 days of the transfer window. I think there is an option for Celtic to go deep into the Europa League, but for one thing, they'll have to really avoid any performances ever as bad as that one. Just trying to catch up with some of these comments. Michael Ross saying Boyle just scored for Hibs. That's good news for Scottish football anyway. And because of my father was a lifelong Hibs supporter and a lifelong Hearts supporter. So as a boy, he would go to Tynecastle one week and then go to Easter Road the next. I think something that would be unimaginable nowadays, but in the times of the years just post the Second World War, there was a lot of camaraderie between the Hibs fans and the Hearts fans at all the different schools in Edinburgh. Yep. I think Rangers apparently played abysmally. Celtic in the second half played abysmally as well. One could say that they surrendered as well to LASK. Great to have you on, Kev166. Yep, totally agree, Alison Timpany. Come on the high bees. It's good for Scottish football. Kieran Allen, great to have you on as well. All the regulars, it's really good. Rubber Duck as well. Hail to you as well. Oh no, bad news from Michael Ross, I guess, regarding Hibs having their goal disallowed. Craig McLean, still can't believe Tuesday my mood has lifted somewhat for some reason. Well, certainly I was actually quite happy. As I said, my dad was a Hibs fan and a Hearts fan, primarily a Hibs fan, but I do have a soft spot for Hibs, much more so than Hearts. And for Scottish football, it's good that Hearts are through. It'd be great if, for me and for Scottish football, if Hibs got through as well. But quite right, Craig McLean. Tuesday was one of the worst Celtic results of my memory. For me, it's right up there with when we lost to Motherwell on the last day of the season to blow the league, when it looked quite set for Celtic to win the league. That was, for me, probably the worst day, the worst results, because I had such strong expectations and hope that we were going to win the title that day, and then to blow it in the last 10 minutes. And much the same if you think about the game on Tuesday. In effect, 4-1 up, 45 minutes to go. You can afford to concede 2 goals and still get through the tie. For me, Celtic seemed to be far too open at the start of the second half. Quite why we didn't tighten up midfield, maybe go to a back 5. Pack the central midfield, because LASK were not the strongest out wide. Sligo boy, I'm laughing at both Celtic and Rangers, mostly Rangers though. Well, I'm not laughing for Celtic. I was not crying for Celtic, but I was certainly very upset, disappointed, shocked, appalled, all these kind of words. Great to have you on, Wyoming COC. Hail, folks. McCowan's performance was one of the worst I've ever seen. Shouldn't get near the team after that. I didn't read the article in great depth, but certainly the suggestion was his stats for the half hour, it'd be half an hour plus extra time that he played, were amongst the worst in the history of football in terms of giving the ball away, passes being missed, tackles missed, etc. And of course he was largely the culprit for giving away that last goal. Ginecki also was useless, another terrible substitution. Ralston was pretty rubbish. I thought Murray played pretty well, Scales played pretty well, Hattati played pretty well. None of them played great, but I think those 3 subs did okay. Casper Hu was, for me, a massive disappointment, and so was Camilla Duran. Given that both of them seemed to settle into Celtic, it was, for me, quite a shock that they both so massively underperformed, given how well they'd performed for their previous teams in last year's Champions League. I was quite surprised that they seemed, like every Celtic player, to kind of freeze in the second half. I think we got our tactics wrong. I think we got the selections wrong. I think we got the substitutions wrong. And I think it felt to me at Celtic at half-time, thought we're 1-1, we can score a goal and win this game, when all they really had to say to themselves is we can concede 2 goals, play really tight, hit them on the break, which we proved in the first half we could do, because we did actually have what should have been potentially 2 or 3 other goals in the first half from Casper Hu. Kev one, what defence? Well, I thought under the circumstances in the first half, especially, Trusty and Carter Vickers and Donovan and Kieran Tierney had cleared the lines really well. Second half, defence fell apart, midfield fell apart. And for me, a large role for the midfield on Tuesday in the second half was to protect the back four. Maybe go to back five, maybe have McGregor, Bauer, Hatate, etc. lining up to block them off centrally, because they were a very central side LASK. But certainly second half, there were mistakes, lack of coordination, lack of cohesion all over the pace. Wyoming CSC, still think last season was worse. At least LASK are a decent side. We lost to a very, very low-level team, a team made up of a largely free transfers and young Kazakhstani players. At least with LASK, it's a team that had a fair number of international players, an American and Nigerian, someone from the Czech Republic, 3 or 4 Austrian internationals, a couple of under-21 internationals from Austria. So it was a more than decent side. However, Celtic on paper, the value of Celtic's squad on paper is twice as much as LASK's. Hugh Jameson, really good question. It's something that I talked about in the video and in comments and stuff in regards to the post-match video. I was really surprised how many Celtic players went down with cramp. According to, I think from what Kasper Schmeichel was saying in the commentary stuff, that the pitch was rather, the grass was thick. It was rather difficult to get your footing on it, difficult to get your balance on it. Those kind of things can affect your ability to fight off cramp and stuff. There were some theories about the fact that with Linz in Austria being relatively high up in terms of altitude, that there might have been a degree of that, a difficulty with Celtic readapting to the conditions. At the height that Linz is, it shouldn't really have mattered. But again, somebody else that I was talking to a week or so ago had said that it was known that that playing in the higher altitudes, not that it's particularly high altitude in Linz, but it's higher by many hundreds of feet than Glasgow or Edinburgh or wherever in Scotland, then it could have a bit of an effect on you. Clashman Umpty, evening. Another year, another autopsy. We do more of them, Quincy MD. I think, unfortunately, that's the case. I think Celtic this season, over the summer, have made 4 good signings. If you count Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, and it's another decent signing. Yes, Celtic should have got those players in earlier, if it was possible to get them in earlier. Difficult to know whether Karabag, Bodo Glimt, etc. would have sold their players earlier. There's a chance that neither of those teams would have sold their players earlier. Paderborn played very hard to get with Bauer. Oviedo the same with Hassan. Hassan also was on an extended holiday, so that would have slowed things down by 2 or 3 weeks as well. James Smith, we should have shut up when they scored the second, and that's on Martin. Yes, I think either Martin O'Neill got his instructions onto the pitch and the players just didn't do what they were told. Find that hard to believe. Or O'Neill and Maloney thought that we should actually go for it and try and get back to 2-2, which would have almost certainly have put the game completely and totally out of place. But we conceded another goal 10 minutes later, so just trying to catch up with these comments. I'm sorry if I'm missing out any really clever, brilliant comments. Robert Duck, who looked like with a couple more letters in the game. I was really surprised. missing those 2 or 3 chances. Any striker can miss chances like that. None was a really gilt-edged chance. There were both the 2 chances he missed, plus the one when he nearly got it in the 3rd minute, sliding into the 6-yard box, were all that I would have expected him to have taken, but I wouldn't have massively faulted him for missing them. But his inability in the second half to ever hold up a ball, win a ball at the halfway line, win a foul, do anything, that was really, really quite shocking to me. And the fact that Duran looked completely isolated, anonymous on his wing. And had I been Martin Neal, which of course I'm not, I would have been taking off Duran and or Ho, who are maybe using the pace of players like Hassan, Callum Osmond over the top. I think Callum Osmond, as he proved against Midtjylland in his brief performance against Midtjylland last season, his pace to drive at defences can be very, very dangerous. Ronit McNairney, Partizan Belgrade was another collapse. Jakinovski scored 4 goals. Yes, it was it feels like an awful long time ago. Celtic have given up similar 3-0 first leg leads in Europe. Way back in 1964, apparently we lost the European Cup Winners' Cup semi-final to Budapest, having been 3-up from the first leg. We gave up 4 goals and went out 4-3 on aggregate to Budapest 62 years ago. Obviously, I wasn't alive then, so I don't remember the game. But maybe 1 or 2 of your other ones, other of you do. Alison Timpany, I think we all got confused second half whether to shut up shop or it's still go for it, and result we got a total battering. It was devastating to watch. Actually, I thought when the clock ticked through to 90 minutes, I thought, yay, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to battle for 30 minutes, not concede a goal. We're going to ride our luck. The ball hits the bar, near misses, saves, blocks, etc., and we're going to get away with it. Then I thought, oh no, they scored despite a brilliant save by Sinisalo. Our defenders were not first to that second ball, which was another recurring fault of the second half. Our midfielders never got to any clearances from our defenders to clear the second ball. It was just a constant wave of pressure, one after another from LASK. And I thought our wide players, our attacking player, who and our midfielders really, really underperformed. And I think had they done better, they'd have taken a lot of that pressure off the defence, which is kind of what happened in the first leg. Who did a great job of winning fouls on the halfway line, getting the ball up the other end of the pitch, and then we took advantage and scored goals from it. Paradise Huddle, we were minced last night. No way around that. But Jablonec, well, I would say, obviously it's not going to be possible, but I would say, having seen the highlights of the Rangers Jablonec first game and reading the text version of the second game, and watching LASK over 2 legs, I think LASK in a head-to-head battle with Jablonec would be a massive winner for LASK. Michael Roche saying, should we invest heavily in pickle juice? Cramps, to be fair, in Scotland is not usually a major problem, except in maybe in August and in May, when the weather can get rather hot and sunny, potentially, although it's been chucking it down with rain where I live for most of the afternoon and the evening. So it's not usually, cramps is not usually a major problem. Having said that, of course, we may potentially be playing in warmer countries like Spain, Italy. Israel is obviously a very, very hot country. We potentially could play against Hapoel Beersheva. So, yes. Hugh Jameson, got to say congratulations to LASK. They deserved to go through and showed class with their respect for the supporters who lost life. All those things are entirely true. LASK showed the benefit of teamwork, good planning, playing for each other, never giving up, fighting 100%. They could easily have buckled under the pressure of being 3-0 down and then effectively 4-0 down, but they kept on fighting, which is what Celtic didn't seem to do in the second half. Kev One thought we had a super duper hooper Celtic trooper free kick coach on board. To be fair, I think our defence of corners and free kicks and balls into the box was generally pretty good. They had a couple of near misses from corner kicks. The fourth goal was a cross into the box to the middle of the box that should really have been cleared, especially if we had more centre backs there to clear it. But unfortunately, we had a centre back at left back and a centre back at right back, and two centre backs and a centre back. So it would have been great, I think, to have had an extra big person such as Dane Murray or Liam Scales in the middle to cover those things, but it wasn't the case. But also our player at the back post should have been quicker to react to that header that was saved by Sinisalo. Velovic, 1969. Some of the language used regarding Luke McCown by our so-called fans was shameful. Do you think when we signed Dundee players, they're being bought to play in the Champions League? We were going out, yeah, well, yes. I think it would have been quite hard for Celtic to come back from being, in essence, 4-1 up at half-time in the second leg and getting to the 90th minute and still being on pace to go through, and then losing the critical fourth goal in the last minute of regular time. It would have been really difficult to bounce back from that, but I was really hopeful that Celtic would rally around each other and kick on, but that wasn't the case. I thought possibly with Sinisalo saving that penalty kick with 5-6 minutes to go, that would have got Celtic to rally, but it didn't, unfortunately. Cashman Umpty, no one deserves online hate. Banter, yes, but it has to be said, McCown is not the standard to play for Celtic, but does. He's only one of many. I think McCown is a perfectly good player to play for Celtic in Scottish games. I don't think he's got the quality clearly to play in European games. Although, having said that, he did score the goal against Stuttgart last season. Sligo Boy, you're saying McCown should not have been declared as part of the Champions League squad, but for domestic only. I think the thing is, at the moment with Celtics having to meet this 4 homegrown players and 4 Scottish trained players quota, we're actually really rather short if we don't put people like McCown or Ralston into the squad, because they count towards that quota. If we didn't have McCown and Ralston in the squad, we then would be relying on our B squad, which is your young players like Colby Donovan, McArdle, etc., to be part of the squad. So I think it swings and roundabouts. And it's one of the other reasons I think Celtic should be really trying to cultivate bringing through young players from their academy into the first team, so getting better development of those players, but also maybe also signing more Scottish players and Scottish trained players, actually Scottish players, to fill those quotas. So really going for the top young Scottish players, such as a season or two ago, a player like Lennon Miller, who I think would have grown into being someone good enough to play European level football. He's not had the best first year in Italy, but he's still a very young player. Wyoming CSC, why are we not signing a defensive midfielder now? That's a very good question. I'm not massively sure. That one of the funny things, odd things, curious things today for me has been reading the various different Celtic sites, fan sites, football sites, transfer sites, and in 2 or 3 articles you read that Celtic and Hajduk Split have agreed a deal to bring Nico Sugar into the club. And that's going to go through it's going to be confirmed tomorrow after Hajduk Split's Conference League last qualifier, which was earlier this evening. And then I read 3 or 4 other stories that are saying a complete and utter opposite, that the deal's completely dead. Now, the one who said the deal's completely dead, from what I can gather, doesn't have a very good record of getting those sorts of things right. The person who's saying that Celtic have got Sigur's signature is a Croatian football transfer pundit expert person, sort of like the Anthony Joseph and the other guy who works for Sky Sports or Fabrizio Romano. So now that the Hajduk Split are through their last qualifier for the Conference League, reportedly Sigur will now be allowed to leave the club. James Smith, Tuesday was the worst. It was. To be honest, I completely get what you're coming from. The massive thumpings we had from Borussia Dortmund and Barcelona, Real Madrid, etc., were pretty horrible. But we were playing against a really, 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 really top level team, 3 or 4 levels above where Celtic was at that time. For me, 0-0 and 0-0 against Kairat Almaty was awful. Losing 5-1 on the night to LASK was, for me, almost as awful as the Kairat Almaty result, because LASK, for me, are still a decent side, a more than decent side. They're a good side. Celtic, as they proved in their first leg, were a better team than LASK. And in the first half of Tuesday's game, Celtic were going sort of 50-50 in my view, because we did have 3 or 4 really good chances. They had 3 or 4 good chances. If it had not been for Nygren's back pass going astray, straight to the Uzor, maybe we could have got into half-time at 1-0 up. Yep, Kieran Ireland. McGowan got dispossessed about 19 times in 20 minutes. That's shocking for any professional football. Yes, there was one of these football sites I don't read terribly closely, that was talking about the number of errors that and giving the ball away that McCowan had done in the short period he was on the pitch was the. Michael Ross saying sack Maloney and let O'Neill pick the team and tactics. Well, O'Neill said that it was all down to him. He took full responsibility, which I thought was quite refreshing in comparison to Brendan Rodgers. When Brendan Rodgers was manager and Celtic had a bad result, all the blame was put on the players or put on the board or put on somebody else. It was never his tactics. It was never his substitutions. It was never his formations. At least O'Neill did what managers are supposed to do, be it a football manager or a manager of a company or a school headmaster or the head surgeon or the head judge in a court, etc. If you are the head of the team, i.e. the manager, you take responsibility. And I think a lot of the changes may well have been his decision or a joint decision with Maloney. Just trying to catch up. I'm sorry if I'm missing out any super comments. Pat McLaughlin, we got beat off Dortmund when Amazon showed a game. I did actually have it's a really strange thing, because I had a funny, horrible feeling, because I couldn't remember what game I'd watched Celtic playing on Amazon before, but I knew that it had been a terrible result for Celtic, and I had this horrible feeling when I saw that it was on Amazon Prime. Michael Ross, no. I am not in the mood for making people laugh. I'm all in the mood for people cheering me up and you cheering me up, but I'm not here as some kind of court jester. As much fun as that might be for other people, I'm not really that sort of personality. Oops, sorry. Rubber Duck, really good comment. Why take Yang off? Should have played the 90. Unless there was some worry with Yang's fitness, I couldn't really see the sense of taking him off and putting Chineki on. Taking him off and putting on Hassan, I could have seen the sense for that, because Hassan does have more strength than Chineki, a lot more pace than Chineki, and in Spanish football and football for Egypt, he has a real reputation for being able to take on a man and beat them with his dribbling skills and his ball control, but also the pace to burn to get past people as well. I could see that move, but I thought Yang in the first half was doing a good job dropping into midfield to get the ball from McGregor or Trusty or from Tierney, spinning in behind and getting into the opposition half. He did create the chance for the goal. He created another good chance. It was his pass to Bauer that went across the box to Ho, who to nearly score in the 3rd minute. Yep, Hugh Jameson, what a waste to have Hassan on the bench and not play him. I couldn't really understand that move. It's Plunge 274. You're saying, what's the truth regarding Sigurd? Is Sigurd happening? I honestly don't know. As I was saying a wee bit earlier on, I've read 3 or 4 stories that are saying the deal is completely dead. I've seen 2 or 3 stories saying that the deal is signed and sealed and just waiting for his team, Hayuk Split, to get to finish their last Conference League game. I don't know. I'm hoping that over the next couple of days, Friday and over the weekend, we find out for definite. So Jay-Z, the Europa draw is on Friday, i.e. tomorrow, 12, and it's 12 noon British time. I'm not sure if there's been the draw's 12 noon at Slugaball Europa. In the Europa, Celtic could earn 20 million. Yes, so they've already earned 8 million euros apparently. Yep, Chipper 67, lunchtime tomorrow. 12 noon. It's either 12 noon or 1 o'clock. Always get a bit confused regarding British summertime and Central European time. Not sure. I'm not sure if there's been a problem with the live stream or the feed, or if people were just making jokes about me not being there. But apologies. The live stream seems to be fine from my point of view, but James Smith, Hassan should have played the first 60 to 70 minutes. I think with Hassan not really having come back to Oviedo after an extended extra holiday from being in the World Cup through to the later stages, he was given extra time off. So I don't think he would have been properly fit to have played played a full game. But I definitely think he should have come on for the last half hour. I'm very much in So Tripper67 saying, how are you and how are you doing and what is your thoughts going into the weekend game? Very good question. I was shocked, miserable, very, very, very disappointed that the players had let us down again, that the management staff, the coaching staff had let us down. I couldn't really believe how badly they played in the second half, having played decently in the first half of Tuesday's game and played for well in many parts of the first game. Although LASK did have plenty of chances in the first game, they didn't take any of them. A couple of disallowed goals, a couple of brilliant saves by Sinisalo. These things happen. So, Paradise Huddle saying, who have the Huns got next in Europe? The Rangers are out of Europe, so their next game will be whoever they're playing on Sunday. Celtic have Falkirk on Saturday. A game that, with Falkirk not having had a great start to the season, should be a game where Celtic can win the game. One slight thought would be, are there any of the players who who didn't finish the game on Tuesday or struggled to finish the game on Tuesday? So thinking about Carter Vickers, Tierney, Casper Hu, Donovan didn't finish the game. That looked like that was maybe an injury. Not certain about Mika Bauer. There might be one or two thoughts about some of the Celtics players not being fit and available for Saturday's game. I think Celtic really have to and guess what Celtic did today was they sat down, watched the first half, watched the first game, but watched the second half and watched the second half of the LASK game, and then there were some really hard truths said to them by O'Neill, Maloney, Fotheringham, the analyst coach Grant, and also the players, McGregor, etc., also laying down the law, saying what they thought, and then getting all those demons and all those bad emotions and all those negative things out, work, and then starting to plan for Falkirk tomorrow and then beating Falkirk comfortably on Saturday. And I certainly expect Celtic to come bouncing back and have a good, strong performance on Saturday and beat Falkirk. Under O'Neill, pretty much sure every time Celtic had a rotten game in Europe under O'Neill, we came back fighting well the next time. So after the 3-1 to Midtjylland, we came back well. After the Stuttgart 4-1 defeat, we came back well. After the Dundee United 2-0 defeat, we came back well as well. So, David Stalker saying we will get loans. We're not spending. I have got no idea. I've got no idea. That might be the case. It might not be the case. It might be a mixture of different things. I've got nothing against loan deals, particularly loan deals like Carter Vickers or Jota or Paolo Bernardo, where there is a transfer option at the end of it. I'm not a big fan of bringing players through who are contracted to other clubs and are not going to be Celtic players in the future, or there's no chance of them being a Celtic player in the future. So let's say, for the sake of example, last year we got Sirachi on loan from Boca Juniors, and at the end of that there was a 1.5 million transfer, much the same as it was with Jota, Carter Vickers, Paolo Bernardo, etc. in the past. That would have been great. I'm a big fan of loans in that case, because it allows that player to get used to Celtic get used to the player. They then bedded in, and Carter Vickers and Jota both turned into very, very good players for us. Paolo Bernardo never quite reached his potential for Celtic, but I think a loan to buy deal is a good option. Now, if you believe some stories, Celtic are still looking to get Gavidas Giannoutis of Torino in. Celtic are still looking to buy a Nico Sugar. They're looking to buy a new goalkeeper. There's been 3 or 4 different names put forward. The most recent of which that I read that looked more definite was Sam Johnston, the goalkeeper at Wolves, who went from being first choice at the start of last season to the third choice at the start of this season. He is an excellent ex-England international. He's played for several English Premier League clubs: Wolves, West Brom, Crystal Palace, and Manchester United. So Sam Johnson would be an interesting backup to Viljami Sinisalo, with the potential backup for Viljami Sinisalo with the potential to take over from Viljami Sinisalo if Sinisalo got injured or lost his form, etc. Despite the fact Celtic lost 5-1 to LASK, I wouldn't have blamed Sinisalo for any of the goals. He made a brilliant save on that header in the 90th minute. It wasn't his fault that there was no defender there to clear the ball, like there was when the ball hit the bar. Kieran Tierney was in the right place to clear that. Well, that was pretty much the last thing he did. Nobody was there to help out Sinisalo, and that's, again, was, for me, a recurring theme. Yeah, good point, Jay-Z. Sam Johnson's 33 years old. Why do we always go for keepers that age? We need a young keeper that will be here for a few years to challenge Sinisalo. I would be much happier if the goalkeeper was the same age as Sinisalo, or maybe something like 25, 26, 27, 28, something like that. Because you're quite right, a goalkeeper of 33, you're probably going to get 3, 4, 5 years of more career for them. If you get a goalkeeper in who's 25 or 28, you're going to get 10 years with them. And that was what I thought one of the bonuses of getting Sinisalo when we got him a couple of seasons ago. He was 21, 22. He was already a Finnish international. And I think Sinisalo is a good goalkeeper for Celtic. And good counterpoint from David Stalker. I take Sam Johnson, the better experience than Toth. So Toth is, I guess, about 5 years younger than Sam Johnston. Toth was the goalkeeper of the season last season in the English Championship. Celtic's won. Segura is realistic at 3.5 million. It's the goalkeeper responsibility to organise his defence. Okay, fair enough. Carter Vickers isn't match fit and a yard slower. Yep, Pat McLaughlin, 28, 34 for a keeper. I don't mind. Yes. Well, we did sign Craig Gordon relatively late in his career. We obviously signed Kasper Schmeichel late in his career. We signed Joe Hart late in his career. Craig Gordon did very well for Celtic as a goalkeeper. Joe Hart gave us 3 good seasons. Kasper Schmeichel gave us a season and a bit that was good, and then he got himself injured. Plunge 274. Now, Johnson did have a shoulder injury last season. Reportedly, it has completely and totally got better. It's just that Wolves bought a Portuguese keeper during last season when they got relegated. And they bought another goalkeeper, so he's dropped from being first choice at the start of last season for Wolves to third choice. He was injured, but his shoulder is completely, totally better. So they say. I don't know. I'm not his doctor. I'm not his orthopedic surgeon, so I don't know. Oh, great to have you on, Yvonne G. Looks like Hibs are going out. You sound like somebody was saying that Gent had scored a goal. All right. Sligo Boys saying own goal against Hibs. 92nd minute. Oh, it's really sad. Jay-Z, but saying that Van der Sar was 34, coming 35 when he signed for Man United from Fulham. There's I think it's one of these things where there's evidence on both sides. There's good points and bad points. One could definitely say with Sam Johnson, you've got a goalkeeper who has been up at international level, 4 caps for England. He's played for Man United for many, many years through the youth system, backup goalkeeper for a couple of seasons at Man United. He went out on loan multiple times, so he's able to fit into new teams. Paul Maguire, great to have you on, but sad news for Hibs. 2-3 to Ghent. Hibs out. That's a shame. James Smith, signing keepers over 30s just cheap. Well, if Celtic were able to sign half of the goalkeepers in the English Premier League or half the goalkeepers in Serie A, they're all going to be goalkeepers over in their 30s. There aren't many real world-class goalkeepers who are that young. There are a few, but I don't see signing a goalkeeper who's over 30 as being cheap. There are plenty goalkeepers who are 30 plus, where you'd be paying 10, 20 million for them. So for me, it's not a cost-cutting exercise. It's just the availability. Sam Johnston is a good goalkeeper, good experienced career at the highest level, and he is likely to be available because Wolves have got two other first-choice goalkeepers, and they've got a very promising academy young player they want to get through. Rubber Duck, goal at 30 is ideal. Sabah have qualified for the Champions League team from Azerbaijan, founded 2017, ground capacity 8,969. Yes, so Sabah took the place of Karabag. Karabag qualified for last year's Champions League. They were the Azerbaijani champions. In essence, Karabag have been Azerbaijani champions for many seasons in a row, a wee bit like Celtic. And then in some ways you could say Sabah were like Rangers, because Karabag had won the title year after year for about 8 or 9 years. Then Sabah won it last year, a bit like Rangers have won it once in the last 15 years in Scotland. And they have the benefit of their season having already started and been well down the line, so they're all fully fit. They're playing as a team. They know each other. They know their tactics. They know their players. And they very successfully came through, I think, all 4 rounds of qualifying to get that stage. So well done to them. And again, it proves, like Kairat Almaty the season before, there's a great strength in having your season run from spring through summer to autumn, because in the Champions League qualifying stages, if you are from a smaller league, you're halfway through your season, like Kairat Almaty were, like Sabah are well into their season, because of what the climate they play in and the way that they play their football there. Yes, Jay-Z, a keeper I would have loved to have at Celtic was Anthony Patterson, who used to play for Sunderland. There were rumours that a couple of years ago that was going to be that Celtic were looking to sign him, but that okay, James Smith, there's enough goalkeepers out there well under 30 who we could get in, but Celtic don't look at them. There's an argument on both sides that maybe what you need to back up Viljami Sinisalo is an experienced goalkeeper, particularly a goalkeeper in Sam Johnston, who has spent over his career some of the time being the number 2 at a football club, some of the time as number 1 at the football club. And as David Stalker is saying, he prefers an older keeper. So, and we have over the years, we have had several keepers who have been that bit older. We've had several keepers who have been that bit younger. Fraser Forster was a good example of a younger goalkeeper, a relatively inexperienced goalkeeper. We got him from Newcastle on loan. If we look at another of my favourite goalkeepers of the past, the Celtic, Artur Buric, he came from Poland about the age of 25. So I think it swings and roundabouts. Jay-Z, Callum Ward, who was at Motherwell, would have been a great backup. Motherwell sold him for about 500,000. I think that's about right. He certainly had a good season for Motherwell last season. He had, I think that was his one and only season in Scottish football, but he had a perfectly good season. That didn't seem to be someone that Celtic were looking at. Hugh Jameson, Boric was crazy but class, I think. Artur Boric was a brilliant goalkeeper. David Stalker, you raise a very, very good point. I'll see if I can find this slide quickly. Yes, so David Stalker is saying, don't like this deadline day time, 5 p.m. on the 3rd of September. So, yes, so just for a wee bit of clarification, there is a transfer deadline that Celtic more have to fit into, which is they have to have their Europa League squad, A-list squad, entered by 11 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of September, i.e. In 6 days' time. So they have to basically, as of exactly 6 days today, around about 11 o'clock at night on Wednesday next week, they have to have their squad in for the Europa League. Anybody who's not signed for Celtic by 2300 on 2nd of September, i.e. next Wednesday, can't play in the Europa League. Now, the transfer window for Scotland doesn't shut till 5 p.m. the following day, Thursday, so a week today. But if Celtic sign a player between last thing on Wednesday night and 5 p.m. on Thursday evening, they can only play in Scotland in the Scottish Premiership, the Scottish League Cup, the Scottish Cup, and they can't ever play for Celtic in the Europa League until we get to the knockout phase. Now, a player who's already at Celtic and is a part of Celtic's squad as of 11 p.m. next Wednesday can be brought into the Europa League squad as a replacement for an injured player, like we did in the past when Alistair Johnston got badly injured and Kelechi Iheanacho got injured. We brought in Callum Osmond, who was already at Celtic, to replace one of them in the squad. And then, unfortunately, Osmond then got injured straight after. So there are two transfer window deadlines. If we want the player to be playing for Celtic in the Europa League as well as domestic football, they have to be signed by 11 p.m. next Wednesday. If we're happy for the player just to be available for Scottish games up until the Europa League knockout phase, we can sign them between Wednesday evening and 5 p.m. on Thursday. To me, it does seem a bit stupid that we've got in essence, because most European leagues, including the English league, they shut down on the Monday or the Monday going into the Tuesday, I think. But anyway, the English leagues and many other leagues are shut down the transfer window the day before the UEFA deadline. Hopefully people find that a wee bit interesting. So basically, two transfer deadlines. The more important one for European football as well as domestic football is actually 11 p.m. next Wednesday. There is this additional transfer window in Scotland staying open till tea time on Thursday evening. But then that player would only be eligible up until February to play in Scottish games. They couldn't play in European games, but they could be brought into the squad for the European games once Celtic get into the knockout phase. Plunge 274, why is our window extended? I don't get it. I think the idea is to get round this last minute frantic medicals and transfer sheets being faxed here, there, and everywhere. I think it's to try and get around this frantic chaos between about 10 p.m. on transfer deadline night through to about midnight, where there's stuff going back and forward and players turning up late and having medicals in London or in France, but signing for Celtic and signing for Dundee or Rangers or whatever. So I think it's to allow the clubs in Scotland to have a period of grace where they can finalise deals, but those players would only be eligible to play in Scottish football, not European football, if they're signed on the Wednesday, signed on the Thursday, not the Wednesday. But it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But the rationale I read was it's to avoid this chaos last thing on Wednesday night or on Tuesday night, depending on when your window shuts, and to give extra time for everything to get settled down. And then if you think about, for the great majority of teams in Scotland, having that extra day is very important because Motherwell are out, Rangers are out, Hibs are out. So the only two teams where it now actually has an effect in Scottish terms are Celtic and Hearts, who have to get their dealings done by Wednesday at 11. All the other Scottish teams... Smell the glove. You never thought you'd hear me saying Huns. Well, I'm never a big fan of nicknames and calling people names and not nice things. But now and again, things do slip out. Hugh Jameson, I loved it a few years back when Peter Oddenwingie travelled for a transfer that he thought was happening but had fallen through. I'm afraid J7D2R, David, I am not a rebel. I've never been a great one for breaking the rules or challenging authorities. Strange love the Doctor. Keepers are just like drummers. Players keep around for a laugh. Well, I think in Viljami Sinisalo we've got a good goalkeeper who's going to get better and better. I think his style of football particularly fits Celtic, i.e. he is actually a goalkeeper who is good with the ball at his feet, given the fact in Scottish football, we're in the many games we're playing against teams who are playing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 defenders. So it is very important that Sinisalo's comfortable coming out his goal to the edge of the box or even into the halfway inside the Celtic half to keep passes going to Johnston or Donovan or Carter Vickers or Trusty or Tierney or McGregor, etc. And for me, he's way better than any Celtic goalkeepers had for quite a number of years in terms of that sweeper-keeper role and also the recycling role. He's more comfortable than Joe Hart was, a bit more comfortable than Kasper Schmeichel was. He was pretty good at it. But I think Sinisalo especially is good at it. I think he's a pretty good shot stopper. I think he could work on his coming for crosses a bit better and taking command of his goal better. Milky Moo, bye-bye the Rangers, yep. Michael Ross, quite right, it slips out now and then. And hail to you, Mikey Moo. Right, good question, David Stalker. How many players do you think we'll get? I think Celtic in the last 7 days of the window are going to get in an additional midfielder. If Hatate leaves in the next few days, I think Celtic then need to get 2 midfielders in, be it in that case possibly a loan deal with a purchase clause at the end of it, plus buying a player like Sigur or Geniutas, etc. We do need to have an experienced backup goalkeeper, better than Ross Doohan, because he's not good enough to be our number 2. I'm not massively fussed whether it's a goalkeeper above 30 or under 30. So I'm okay with Sam Johnson. I'm okay with Balázs Toth. I'm okay with Dinko Horkas and all these other ones who may or may not be available. I think we definitely have to get a left back in. I'm okay with this Emanalo guy from Chelsea, but I do think we probably need to have another left back additional to that. Unless we're going to go to a back 3 as being our standard formation, in which case we don't need to have too many backups to Kieran Tierney. But if we're going to play a back 4 with Tierney as a left back, I think we have to have 2 backup left backs. Scales is a good emergency deputy backup for Tierney. Trusty can play left back. He plays left back for America. But I don't think having them as our backups to Kieran Tierney is a good idea. And I have my doubts about an 18, 19-year-old being the left back we have to rely on. Plunge 274. We need a goalkeeper, a left back, 2 midfielders, a centre half, and a striker. I would be very happy with a goalkeeper, a left back, 2 midfielders. Not massively sure about a centre half. I'd be okay with as well, particularly if the centre half was a defensive midfielder who also can play happily as a centre back. A player like Nir Beaton, to think of a player recently for Celtic. Obviously, Nir Beaton's now retired and living in Israel. But that sort of player who can play both defensive midfield and can play centre back. We had that player with Tomoki Iwata. There are quite a lot of these hybrid defensive midfielder centre back options out there. I don't think Celtic will sign another striker because we do have Camilo Duran, we do have Casper Hu, we do have Callum Osman, we do have Johnny Kenny. They're all at the club. And I think because all 4 have been kept at the club, there's no rumours that any of those 4 are leaving the club, which suggests to me that Celtic are happy with Hu and Duran as their number 1 and number 2 central strikers, backed up by the 2 younger guys. And it is going to be interesting as the season goes on whether Callum Osman gets more of a chance to come on as a sub, particularly in the games after the European game, to rest up the 2 more experienced players. I think we are actually quite blessed at the centre forward position, because I do think Camilo Duran's at his best as a striker rather than playing out wide. And when he played in the first leg against LASK, a lot of his play was through the middle and not down the side. On Tuesday, for some reason, we kept him just playing him out wide on the right, and he was completely not isolated. Pat McLaughlin, we need a right back on loan. I would say, again, that's why if Celtic could go after Nico Sugur, I would be very, very happy, because he would solve 2 of Celtic's potential problems. For me, Nico Sugur has played half of his career as a professional in Croatia as a right back and half of his career as a defensive midfielder. And so that would basically solve 2 of Celtic's problems. So that's why I'd be really keen for Celtic to go for him, especially because there's always a chance that Johnson's going to get re-injured. And next season, Johnson probably will be one of the players to leave the club. Jay-Z, are we signing young sideshow Bob from Chelsea? When I last read the stories last Friday, the Celtic reportedly were going to be signing Emanalo, Landon Emanalo, the American English player, on at the start of this week, just past, i.e. Monday, but that never happened. He apparently has got a minor injury at the moment. Jay-Z, I'll take Longello any day. I think Longello has shown playing for Motherwell last season and so far this season. He's a very, very useful left back, left wing back, can play a bit further forward. Not so sure about his defensive ability, but at Celtic in normal Scottish games, that's not terribly important. So if we used Kieran Tierney primarily for the European games and the big Scottish games, and then Longelo came on to replace him, a bit like Sirachi did at spells last season, both as a sub, but also starting games in place of Tierney. I think Longelo would do a fine job for Celtic in Scottish football. Maybe not European football, but definitely in Scottish football. Michael Ross, I am definitely wearing I'm wearing underpants, and I'm wearing long shorts as well, cargo pants, short type things. So quite what Raimo Monet and Quinny on the Celts are here and all the various other ones do, I don't know, or whatever that guy on ACSOM does. But I can guarantee I do all these live streams fully dressed. Charlie McLaughlin, we need a left back, right back, centre midfield, centre back, and goalkeeper. Woefully underprepared for Champions League. Well, I think the first leg proved that Celtic were good enough to beat LASK. They were good enough to defend basically well enough, and they were good enough to score goals. And in the first half, we defended basically okay, and we had scored one goal, could have scored 2-3 more goals in the first half again Tuesday. So I think that we had the players on the pitch and on the subs bench to take us through that leg. Having additional players is great, so that would have helped these things. But having another goalkeeper on the bench other than Doohan wouldn't have really changed the game. And we also don't know whether these other players being brought in to a new club, learning new tactics, learning new languages, potentially trying to settle in and find a house, a flat, or not live in a hotel room, etc., as several of the players are currently doing. Would they have come on? Would they have started the game and been super and played really well for the whole game? Because we had plenty of players who have played well all season and played well in the first leg and played pretty fine in the first half of the second leg, who completely disappeared in the second leg. Who's to say whether had we bought Genaitis and Mamic and Sigur and whomever else you want to choose, how do we know they wouldn't have also capitulated and given in and caved in like the other players did? And to be fair to the other players, the players who collapsed and capitulated and gave up on Tuesday, they're the ones who fought through last season. Many of them are the ones who fought through last season to help Celtic win the title. They're the ones who went on a 10-game out of 10 winning run from the Dundee 2-1 win onwards. So lots of those players in last season, when the chips were down, when the going got tough, they got going and delivered victories for Celtic by responding well to pressure. So, but on Tuesday, for one reason or another, probably a combination of tactics, formation, loss of confidence possibly, or confusion over all those things, the whole second half went completely and utterly chaotic, disorganized, and nobody on the pitch or off the pitch took any kind of leadership to change things. I was really, really, really disappointed in Callum McGregor and Carter Vickers and Tierney, who showed no leadership when we went 2-1 down and 3-1 down. There didn't seem to be anybody on the pitch taking leadership, and at the same time, it didn't appear that O'Neill and Maloney were doing anything off the pitch either to sort things out. Smell the glove, good point. I wonder how many injuries we have for Falkirk and Aberdeen games coming up. Be interesting to see tomorrow just who is in the training ground video, whether players like Tierney, Donovan, Casper Hu, Carter Vickers are fit and available. We'll obviously find out with Martin Neal's Friday afternoon press conference. It did sound from what Viljami Sinisalo was saying that they did have a bit of a post-mortem autopsy in the dressing room. I'm 100% certain when they got back to Scotland on Wednesday, they probably had again a big debriefing, tactical meeting as well. Sligo Boy saying, I take it this is a David 67 no-show, just us peasants talking. I'm not quite sure what that means. I am 100% sorry that I'm not keeping up with all these comments, but it is just me trying to talk. So I'm not quite sure there's a bit of being a no-show. I have been talking non-stop for 70 minutes. D. McCoy, keep the head, lads. We'll come good as hard as it is. We've got a good squad there. I think I agree with you there. James Smith, they were scared. Yeah, that certainly is what Cal McGregor said. They seem to completely and totally freeze, which is strange because so many of those players are current or recent internationals. Casper Hu, a Danish international. Austin Trusty, Carter Vickers, both American internationals. Kieran Tierney, Ralston, they both went to the World Cup. Sinisalo, an experienced Finnish international. Mika Bauer, under-21 international for Germany. Dane Murray, ex-Scotland under-21 international of recent years. Callum McGregor would still be part of Scotland's squad if he was fit enough. Hugh Jameson, thank you. You do a great job fronting the show on your own, David, a terrific lone striker. So I'm not quite sure, has there been problems with the live stream cutting out? I'm not quite sure. There's been several comments saying that I'm not here or I'm not talking or etc. I'm not really sure because it appears to be all functioning from my end, but sometimes the live stream feed does go down. Anyway, hello, good evening to you as well, David Grant. D. McCoy, we will learn from that defeat and we know we have to close down quicker. I think that's completely true. Kieran Allen, all logic goes out the window in the comments that we come here, David, to hear some sense. That's what does that tell you? Okay, fair enough. Well, I do try and say what I think. Whether people agree with it or not is entirely fine. I'm a great one for sharing opinions and people who have had conversations with me either via the live stream or through the comment section where I do try and respond to everybody's comments. I am happy to debate. I'm happy to admit I'm wrong. I'm happy to share opinions. I'm happy to share other people's angles on things. Jay-Z, Adama Traore is a free agent. Imagine if we could get him swing Rangers Sevco players like a WWE Royal Rumble. Yeah. Kieran Allen, you're the only sense. Thank you very much. You're the only sense here. Trust me. Braggertone, on yourself, David. Hail, hail. Yep, fair enough. Thank you. Good point, Jay-Z. I was actually looking that up. That Jason Denayer, who I thought was a really super centre back for us about 10 years ago when he was 19, 20 years old. He's currently available. I think he was playing ultimately in Saudi Arabian football, but moved on from there. Really good point, James Smith. No captain should ever admit that they are scared. I've lost all respect for Callum. David, your stream is good. Thank you for all that thing. I completely agree. I was really disappointed in Callum McGregor saying the players were scared. If I was a teammate, even if that was true, which I don't think it was true. I think they froze. I think they got spooked. I think giving away a goal in the 48th and then the 58th minute, for some reason or other, they froze up and seemed to completely lose all team spirit, all team cohesion, and so many of them in that spell after that either looked dead on their feet, exhausted, which is really concerning, or mentally just weren't up for the fight. And 100% LASK's players were 100% up for the fight. Pat McLaughlin, was it a blast at them going off injured when the tough got going? Maybe it's from the captain. It's possible. Possibly he thought that Kieran Tierney going off with about half an hour to go, maybe he was hiding from the fight. Carter Vickers looked like he had a genuine problem with leg cramp. He did seem to be hobbling about. Casper, who appeared to be struggling, then he got given the pickle juice at the start of extra time, and that certainly seemed to at least get him able to run about. Not that he actually did very much in the final 30 minutes, but maybe the rationale for O'Neill was to keep Hu and Duran on for penalty kicks, assuming that Celtic could have defended okay for 30 minutes. But unfortunately, we had that very badly misplaced pass by McCowan. None of the other midfielders were blocking off the shot. And to be fair to Adeniran, the LASK striker, he got it right into the far corner. Very, very difficult for Sinisalvo to see the shot because it was kind of coming through Trusty's body or skimming past Trusty's body right into the corner. However, there's no way that McCowan should have been trying to play out of defence and been caught so badly on the ball. Clear the ball up to the halfway line, see whether Hu can actually take control of the ball or whether Duran could actually take control of the ball. Now, admittedly, they hadn't been doing that terribly effectively in earlier parts. Super. So we'll put that wee poll up there. Hopefully, the poll last week for some reason didn't work. But certainly, I think it'd be interesting to see whether we still have the confidence that Celtic's squad, as it stands now, and assuming that we do get 2, 3, 4 more players in the final 7 days of the window, are we good enough still to win the treble, the double, just the league, or win absolutely nothing at all? I don't think the way that I'm not massively sure, James Smith. It says, how do you vote on that, David? I'm not massively sure how you vote on it. The people, StreamYard, who do the live streams, and it looks like some people have managed to vote. So, good point, Pat McLaughlin. So, I'm sorry, to answer your question, James Smith, I'm not massively sure how you vote. My guess is there's something you can click on to vote. It may not be available on all different versions of the YouTube. I think there's a vote, it says, up in the top corner. And there's a poll, a vote. As I said, that maybe it's not available on every option. Yvonne G saying type in 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1 is how I vote. Yep, fair enough. Good. I agree. I think Celtic are on course for a treble. Just to expand on that, I don't think Rangers have brought in, Rangers have brought in about 11 players. They don't seem to actually, they don't seem to be actually able to turn them into a team. Rubber Duck going for just winning the league, fair enough. But it doesn't look like Rangers have got themselves organised at all. They've got a whole heap of players. They seem to have a massive surplus of strikers, surplus of wingers, surplus of central midfielders, and they don't seem to have one way of playing. They don't seem to be certain whether they're playing 3-5-2, 4-2-2. Goodness knows what they're playing. They've got Shanklin in the side, Shanklin not in the side. Now, Devlin was banned for being red carded last time around, but they were playing different central midfielders. They changed at half time from a 4-5-1 to goodness knows. Hearts look like they maybe have turned the corner, that they're actually starting to get themselves organised as a team. I don't think their core quality of players is anywhere good as Celtic's, particularly because they did lose a lot of players over the transfer window, over the summer transfer window. Maybe the players that Hearts have bought will turn to be successful like last year's Hearts signings. Again, Motherwell have lost a lot of players in the transfer window. They've signed a few players from here, there, and everywhere. And maybe some of them will turn out to be really good, like Elijah Just or Mazwinizi or Callum Ward or the other guy, the midfielder who ended up going to Greece, I think it was, or Turkey. James Smith, I don't think our defence is strong enough for all 3 trophies. Well, last season, last season with the same 6 or 7 players as our defenders, i.e. Ralston, Johnston, and Donovan at right back, Carter Vickers, Trusty, Scales as the centre back, sometimes Dane Murray, and on the left side we had Kieran Tierney. Admittedly, last year we did have Sirachi, but basically the same back 4 or 8 or 9 players who formed the back 4 are still at Celtic. Good. Robert Up saying, sorry, David, I thought the vote was how many players coming in before the transfer window shuts. I think we'll at least win a double. Fair enough. Yes, I think this Celtic team are good enough to go for the treble again this season. And I think this Celtic team, with a couple of additions for depth and to cover for injuries and form loss and fatigue, is good enough to get through the group stage, into the knockout stage, maybe to the last 16, maybe to the last 8. And if Braga could do it and Freiburg could do it last season, there's no reason why Celtic couldn't do it. And we think about Rangers a few seasons ago, got deep into Europa League as well. So, and that Rangers side that got all the way to the final and lost on penalties to Frankfurt, I don't think we're as good as Celtic's current squad, assuming that Bauer develops and Hassan develops and settles in, and assuming that we get another couple of players in to cover those potential problem positions. So Hugh Jameson saying, Frankfurt, here we come. Celtics won. LASK were a good side. We have the firepower to outscore everyone in Scotland. Completely agree. I think Celtic's defenders, the players that we've got who play in Celtic's back 4, are better than their corresponding players for all the other teams in Scotland. I don't think any of the defenders that Hibs have got, Rangers, Hearts, Aberdeen, etc., are better than Celtic's defenders. Now, there are problems and deficiencies in all of those players. Kieran Tierney, probably the best player of Celtic's got in the back four, alongside Alistair Johnston, but both those two are injury prone. Carter Vickers, some were saying he seems to have lost a bit of pace and a bit of his recovery pace since his recurring injuries. I think there's a lot of truth to that. At times, Austin Trusty can get rather out-muscled by players. For me, Liam Scales lacks pace, so if he misses his tackle or mistimes his challenge, he gives away so many yellow cards. Or the player gets in behind him and he hasn't got the pace to catch up with the player. Strange Love the Doctor. David, who do you think will be Celtic's top scorer this season? And also, what's your favourite canned fruit? So to answer your question, I think Casper Who this season will end up scoring 30 plus. Camilo Duran will end up scoring 20 plus. And assuming that Benjamin Negrin stays at the club, he'll score 20 plus. And I'm also looking for players like Hayu Niang, Callum Osmond, maybe Hassim Hassan, although goal scoring is not his strong point, to chip in a few goals as well. In terms of canned fruit, I'm not a big canned fruit fan. I much prefer fresh fruit like bananas, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, etc. So I'm not really a canned fruit fan. Although I'm not quite sure why you want to know what my favourite canned fruit is, but whatever. Much prefer fresh fruit, bananas, apples, bananas, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, etc. Celtics Celtics one saying levels, we are not Champions League standard Europa with a few strong additions, as in a physically strong and athletic. Yeah, I think looking at the teams who are going to go into the four pots tomorrow, some of the teams are in the wrong pot if you look at the actual strength of the team, but the draw pots are based on the coefficients, which is why Celtic are up in pot 2, because Celtic's been in the Champions League qualifiers and in several Champions Leagues over the last 10 years. We do actually have a relatively high coefficient. It's one of these things where, because Celtic have generally been in the qualifying round, the last qualifying round, or straight into the Champions League 2 or 3 seasons in the last 10, it means our coefficient's actually a bit higher than it would be, given our complete lack of success, whilst teams from Germany, Spain, Italy, who are on paper stronger than Celtic, can often be in the lower pots, as will be the case with Bournemouth and Sunderland, who will likely be in pots 2 and 3. Last year, Bologna were in pot 4, and who obviously were a strong side. Michelin were in pot 3, which was one pot below Celtic last season. So J7, do some scouting on Diego Lieti, Portuguese, 27 years old, centre-back, free agent, no-brainer, would do a shift for us. Yep. I'll try and write myself a wee note to do that over the next day or two. Johnny Briggs, how much would a Bobo Baldi cost nowadays? Certainly, if Celtic had a real no-nonsense defender like Bobo Baldi, very good in the air, very strong, very hard to get past, more than able to throw his weight around and intimidate people, both teammates and opposition players. To be thoroughly fair, we don't tend to. Nobody really tends to have that style of centre back these days. if Celtic do want to play out from the back, a Bobo Baldi style maybe isn't the best one, which is why I wouldn't be against Celtic signing some form of hybrid. Unfortunately, Rubber Duck 67, I don't have a pot image to show. The reason for that, because a lot of the pots aren't finalised until all the Europa League games qualifiers are all ended, and then everything's analysed. They won't actually announce the actual pots until tomorrow morning, because UEFA has to work out all the coefficients and who goes into this pot, that pot, that pot. What I do know for definite is Celtic definitely will be in pot 2, which isn't a particular advantage because you obviously get 2 from pot 1, 2 from pot 2, 2 from pot 3, 2 from pot 4. But there are some strong teams who will be in pot 3, some strong teams will be in pot 4, some weaker teams will be in pot 1, some weaker teams will be in pot 2. I would think that many of the teams we end up playing in the Champions League will be of the same sorts of, play in the Europa League, will be along the same sorts of levels as they were last season. Braga, Midtjylland, Sturm Graz, teams like Dinamo Zagreb and so on. So teams that we can beat, given the fact that also over recent years we have had good results against strong teams. 1-1 draw with Bayern Munich, draw away from home with Bologna, drawing with Atalanta, winning 3-1 against Feyenoord last year, winning 1-0 in Stuttgart last year. So Celtic at its best is good enough to take on strong teams and draw or win, and Celtic at their best is good enough to take on medium-level teams and beat them, i.e. Sturm Graz last season, Utrecht last season, Feyenoord of Holland last season. Nope, Strange Love the Doctor, Rangers are not in any pot. Surprising number of Rangers fans and journalists calling for McInnes to be sacked. Yep, Celtics either of Palace, Bournemouth, Sunderland will be in pot 3. There's a chance that some of them might be in pot 2 or pot 3. It depends on who got through all the other Europa League qualifiers this evening. David Grant, taking Nigren off after he made that mistake, which resulted in LASK equalising, was the wrong move. Nigren is our informed player, scoring and setting up goals. It totally showed in that second half. I think in terms of Nigren's confidence, it probably was very much counterproductive to have taken him off. It probably tactically wasn't a bad thing to do to take off Nigren and put on Hatate, given the fact that Nigren's defending ability is not his strong point by far. I thought taking off Yang was a bad move, given how poorly both Hu and Duran, particularly Duran, was playing in the first 60 minutes. I would not have been against taking off Duran and leaving Yang on, or as I said earlier on, putting Hassan on. And I think there also were far better things. I think Celtic could have gone, if had they wanted to at halftime, to a back 5 and packed the midfield with 2 protective midfielders right in front of the back 5 to cut down the space that LASK used. We seemed to have our starting position far too far up the pitch for the first 60 minutes, which left us open at the back. So it did seem to me that the tactics, the formation, the setup, the mentality for large parts of the game was wrong. And then when we did go 3-1 down, we then seemed to go out to complete and utter total defence with Hu and Duran often back actually in the defensive third. There were 2 or 3 times where Hu was actually in the box defending, when it would have been far better had he or someone else been on the halfway line to get the ball that was cleared out of Celtic's defence, which just meant the ball was coming straight back in. Oops. Robert Duck 67, is Yang a starter now? I think at the moment Yang probably is performing consistently pretty well for Celtic. Performing pretty well for Celtic. I think sooner or later, Hasim Hassan has to start starting games for Celtic. The question then comes down to whether we use Duran and who as two people up front, two players up front, whether we keep on persisting with Duran playing as a wide player, which I don't think is really his strength. The snag also with Ha-Yun Yang is in September, he's going off to play for South Korea in the Asian Cup, which is sort of a compulsory thing. South Korean footballers have got some kind of weird, they compulsorily have to play for the national side to do with national conscription and stuff. Because otherwise, if they're in South Korea, supposedly they'd be called up to do army service for a couple of years. So anyway, I'm hoping that Celtic do bring in another wide player, and I'm hoping that Jota comes back sooner rather than later. He has got he is now ahead of schedule in that he's doing full training with the rest of the players and starting to do ball skill training with the players as well. So he's actually ahead of schedule by a couple of weeks or so. So the talk was he was going to come back sometime in November, maybe December. Maybe we're talking he's kind of going to come back about the same time as Alistair Johnston, i.e. mid-October. The snag being that Ha-Yun Yang will be away for, I think it's 4 games, including both the Rangers games. So for me, I'd be happy to see Celtic sign another wide player or a player who can play midfield and can play out wide. Really good point, Pat McLaughlin. That was something I was saying to myself as well, was whether the tummy bug that Trusty had spread to the rest of the squad, and that Celtic had kind of kept that quiet because they didn't want to have excuses for it. But I did think the fact that so many of the players looked tired and fatigued, more than you'd expect for players who are professionals, but also players who hadn't had to play a weekend game in between the two LASK games. I did wonder whether there was a bug within the Celtic squad, and certainly tummy bugs, gastric flus, etc., do tend to spread quite quickly within squads, etc. It's not unusual in the winter months for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players all to have the flu, all to have sort of gastric tummy bug type flus and viral bugs. So in the fact that also several of them had cramp as well. So J7, I would have loved Adrian Blake. And Adrian Blake is still available for £2 to £3 million from Utrecht. Last time I checked, he was still at Utrecht. He's still available for transfer. There were a few stories yesterday and today saying that Celtic were looking again at Adrian Blake because of the cover for Jota to come back, cover for Yang being away at the Asian Cup for a month, and the fact that Chinecki's form hasn't been consistent. And certainly on Tuesday, he was nearly as bad as Luke McCowan, and in some ways worse than Luke McCowan, in that so many times Chinecki took the ball on the halfway line or halfway inside our half and just lost the ball and didn't track. Unlike Yang, who tracks back brilliantly, or unlike Diaz Maida previously, who tracks back brilliantly if they make a mistake and give the ball away, Chinecki just kind of waved at the player as the player went back down the pitch, which again is why I was so surprised that Yang got taken off to be replaced by Chinecki. It didn't make any sense. Take off Yang and put on a defender. That would made sense. Take off Yang and put on midfielder to plug up the centre of midfield. That makes sense. Or shove Hassan on because of his pace and his ability to really beat a player. James Smith, Hassan's had enough rest. Start him against Falkirk, even at 60 minutes. I think that would be a brilliant idea. Start Hassan on one side. We've got, in that case, we would have probably Yang or Chineki, Yang, Chineki, Forrest on the bench. Maybe we put Casper Hu on the bench if he was struggling with cramp and muscle pains from the Tuesday game. Maybe start Camilo Duran through the middle, which would then allow us to have Hassan one side and Yang on the other. Give Hassan 60 minutes, then shove Forrest or Chineki on to replace him for the last 30 minutes. Hopefully by that, would be 2 or 3 goals up on Falkirk by then. J7, Luke McCowan is pure gash. Can we offer him and 3 million for Mulligan? I think probably, as I said, I think Luke McCowan's a perfectly decent player playing for Celtic in Scottish football. I think that's his level. He clearly isn't a player who's, for me, able to step up to play European football. He's clearly not a player who's got the potential or the ability to get better and better and be an international player. If I was, to me, he's quite. I know Anthony Ralston actually is an international player for Scotland, which is, for me as a Scottish person, rather galling that he is one of Scotland's best right backs. Although, to be fair, he's one of Scotland's best right backs simply because so many of the other right backs have been injured so much recently. But for me, Ralston's another player who's decent at Scottish level, but hasn't got the ability to step up to be European level. I think Donovan can step up. I think Donovan will get better and better. He's only 19, 20 years old. For me, he's going to get better and better for Celtic. Whether Alistair Johnson stays past this season or not will be found out soon. I think clearly, obviously, with Johnson being out injured until October, there's no way that he's going to be going anywhere this transfer window. I think, like all the other players of recent years, I think Celtic will hold on to Johnston in the winter window, come what may, much like we did with Kuhn, much like we did with Engels, with Matt O'Reilly in previous years. Pat McLaughlin, a good midfield shield should make your keeper redundant. Yep, I think that's an excellent point of view, and my analysis of LASK from the first leg was so much of their stuff comes right down the middle with Lubicic and Horvath. They added in a more conventional midfielder for the second leg, which was Bogard, and played Danek off the bench. But so much of their attack comes straight down the middle with Horvath and Lubicic and Bogard on Tuesday. That I couldn't see why Celtic left that area so under protected and so exposed, because it then did allow LASK to do one of the things they're very good at, which is shooting from the edge of the box. And I think 4 of the 5 goals came like that. I think Uzor's shot was just about the edge of the box. The second goal from Lubicic was like that. The third goal from Adeniran was like that. The 5th goal from Adeniran was like that as well. So, Plunge 274 saying I would sign Horvath. I think, well, if we were going to sign Horvath, he's valued about £2 million. I think he is that wee bit on the older side, but then I'm not against an older, more experienced player becoming part of our squad. I'm hoping that this season, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain will be back to complete and total full fitness. I think he could be an important player with his experience, with his calmness, and assuming that he's fit, he probably is a good person to be on the bench in training, in the dressing room, and starting games from time to time. He may actually then help players like Bauer, etc., come through. And if we do sign Sigur or Genitas or Mamic or whomever, maybe that also helps a player like that come through. J7, George Campbell at West Brom would be a great future replacement for Cart Vickers. He's like Cart Vickers regenerated. Yes, he's obviously also a fellow American player. I'm not quite sure. There was talk about Celtic signing him, and then that just seemed to completely disappear. I think he's still playing for, still playing in the English Championship. I don't think he's been transferred anywhere. Totally agree, Hugh Jameson. A good part of early SK's strength was that they were cohesive and had a good team chemistry. I think there's a brilliant point. And for me, that was something that Celtic showed for much of last season under Martin O'Neill, was that team cohesiveness, team spirit, good team chemistry, fighting for each other. And for one reason or another, in the second half especially of this game against LASK, all that chemistry, cohesiveness, team spirit, teamwork, fighting for each other, never say die attitude that got them so many added time goals, or so many goals in the last 5 minutes of the 90 minutes, seemed to completely desert them. I think Celtic scores like 7 goals in added time last season. We also scored the goal that effectively won the title against Hearts in about the 85th minute with Dyson Maida. It was only 3 or 4 minutes from the end of the game, because Celtic kept on fighting, kept on going, kept on attacking, kept on playing for each other. And for one reason or another, hopefully Martin O'Neill and McGregor and Maloney and stuff can work it out. Why did that not happen on Tuesday evening in the second half? Why did that spirit disappear? I take your point, Johnny Briggs. 773 Maida would have won it for us. Well, last season against Kairat Almaty, it was Maida who was doing what Casper Hu did in the 90th minute of the home leg against Kairat Almaty. Maida was through 1-on-1, terrible shot with about 5 minutes to go in Kazakhstan against Kairat Almaty. He was clean through on goal and managed to miss. So last season, Dyson Maida was in the position to win the first leg and win the second leg, and on both occasions he missed a brilliant chance. The kind of thing a striker should be taking 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20. So an informed Dyson Maida, the Dyson Maida we had at the end of last season, would probably have won the game for us, home or away, in the away leg. Possibly his attitude might have actually got the other players better fired up. Maybe that's the case too. Maybe the fact that he would be going hell for leather 100 miles an hour from minute 1 to minute 90. Maybe that would have done it. But last season, in the same position, Dyson Maida missed almost 100% goal chance at the end of the first leg and the second leg. So Sham 6909, any definite news on signings? To answer the question, no. The answer is there's nothing definite. And what really is and so annoying for me is I've read 3 or 4 stories saying that Nico Sigurd deal is completely gone, and then 3 or 4 stories saying the deal is signed, sealed, and delivered. So there's a Croatian football transfer expert who said that the deal is signed, sealed, and delivered, and will go through now that Hajduk Split's European qualifier games are done. That's backed up by a journalist who works for The Sun, I think. However, at the same time, 2 or 3 of the Celtic fan site, website type people, and a chap from the Daily Record, who also works for the Daily Express and for the Press and Journal, is saying the deal's dead. And there are some stories saying the Janitas deal's dead. and there's some stories saying the Giannidis deal is still on, and that the price that Torino won for Giannidis isn't that great, i.e., it's the lower limit, 6 to 8 million, and not 10 to 12 million. J7, David Hearing, Nico Sigurd doesn't want Genk or Toulouse, only Celtic. That's what I like to hear. Get the lad in. Now, that's what 3 or 4 stories are saying, including the Croatian football transfer expert. That's what he's saying. The stories are that because of Alison Johnston, Sigurd's very keen to come to Celtic. However, at the same time, there are several stories saying that the Sigurd deal is dead and he will be going to Genk. Toulouse apparently haven't put a big enough bid in for him. So I'm very hopeful tomorrow we will find out, because, as I said, Hajduk Split's European qualifiers are now done. I'm not sure whether they got through or didn't get through against the Polish side. They were winning late in the game. Yes, J7. What about Ermin Mamic? PAOK from Greece dropped out. Supposedly they're going after another player. They're going after Tahirovic, who was another player that Celtic were supposedly going for at the start of the transfer window. Kieran Ireland, 2 years, I'm debt-free, home paid, rolling free. Well, much like you, our house mortgage has been paid off for a couple of years, which was part of the reason that Mrs. David 67 said I could stop working and be a man of leisure, was that we didn't have to have 2 wages coming into the house, which is very, very nice of her to let me have a relaxing time. Yeah, so Pat McLaughlin's a good question. Is AJ playing a part in his replacement for when he leaves? That's a good question, and for me, there would be a really strong logic to that, because obviously Nico Sigur is a Canadian national of Croatian origin or Croatian parentage. He's played 22 times for Canada. However, all his professional playing career has been over in Croatia at Hajduk Split. He's 22 years old, plays central midfield, defensive midfield, plays right back. If, let's say, he understudied Callum McGregor for a season, was the understudy to Alison Johnston at right back for the season, that would be, for me, a really, really, really good forward-thinking move by Celtic to bring in Sigur, give him lots of games off the bench, lots of games as a starter, deputising for one or other of those two, covering for Johnson if he gets injured, and then next season, Johnson leaves and Sigur takes over as Celtic's first choice experienced right back. J7, O'Neill would love Sigur because of his versatility. Completely agree. That's why I was a big fan of players like Tomoki Iwata. Tomoki Iwata could play midfield, defensive midfield, centre back, could play full back. Nir Beetle was another one who could play centre back and play defensive midfield, could play further forward in midfield. I do like versatile players. And to be fair, if we did go to a back 3, we do actually have several players who happily would play back 3. We have got in Johnson if he's fit, and Tierney if he's fit. We've got 2 players who could play as right centre back and left centre back in a back 3, because they are basically good defenders, but also the confidence to use the ball and pass the ball out of defence. I think Colby Donovan could be another player who could learn the right centre back role of a back 3. I think Carter Vickers is a more than decent centre-back. He's maybe not quite go back to his full fitness. I think Austin Trusty, I like Austin Trusty. A lot of people don't like Austin Trusty. I think he's actually a pretty good defender, particularly when he's playing on the left side of defence. James Smith, I am in Seltzer here are saying the deal's dead in the water, and the Daily Record's saying it's going to. Yes, that's the thing with Nico Sugar. As I said, there's some stories from some journalists saying it's dead. There are some stories. For me, the fact that a Croatian transfer expert person says that Hajduk Split have got 2 deals settled for tomorrow, that these 2 players are leaving Hajduk Split tomorrow now that the European qualifiers are over. That for me is quite a strong story. That's been backed up by 2 or 3 other sources. But at the same time, you've got these Seltzer here for the last 2 or 3 days have been saying definitely the deal's dead. And some other journalists have backed it up. But one of the ones who said the deal's dead, for me, has a very poor track record of getting things right. Johnny Briggs, yep, Trusty's the best of a bad lot. I think I would tend to agree with that. I think all of Celtic's central defenders, Murray, Trusty, Scales, Carter Vickers, have all got deficiencies in areas that are not as good as we might want them to be. Kieran Allen, Celtic already won the league. It's just about progressing the team and strengthening the squad. There's no threat domestically this year. On the face of it, given how all the various different teams have started, Rangers seem to have made the same mistakes that they've been making year after year after year after year, sacking one manager, bringing another manager, bringing in half a new team, or now appears pretty much a whole new team. There are not many players playing for Rangers now as the first choice players that were playing as the first choice players 12 months ago. Nico Raskin reportedly is in the process of leaving the club now. I don't think he was playing this evening for Rangers. That maybe does suggest he's on his way out. Obviously, they sold Diamande. Tavernier was kicked out. They lost Mikey Moore. They lost a couple of their other players who were there on loan. And he seemed to buy a whole lot of numbers of central midfielders, more defensive midfielders, tons of wingers. They seem to have bought yet another winger. And admittedly, Chermiti is injured, but they seem to have bought even more strikers when they already had about three or four at the club. It just seems chaotic. Hearts have had a big turnover of players. They may be, with yesterday's great performance in Vienna, maybe they have turned a corner. Maybe he's actually got them together as a team after 2 months of chaos. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see whether Hearts kick on. I'd be surprised if Rangers are able to kick on for another month or two. A wee bit similar to how they were last season, prior to sacking Russell Martin, who's also having a terrible time. Good question, James Smith. What's my team for Saturday against Falkirk? Partly dependent on who's fit and who's not fit. So as I said, one would have thought possibly from the way that Celtic ended up on Tuesday evening in terms of which players were playing, there might be questions about Colby Donovan being fit to play at right back. Obviously, Alison Johnson's out. There might be questions about Carter Vickers. There might be questions about Tierney. There might well be questions about Casper, who did seem to be really struggling with cramps in his thigh and groin muscles. The question also would be, how fit is Hasim Hassan? Is he fit enough to play the first 60 minutes? So there's a lot of questions. Assuming that everybody is fit for the game on Saturday, I've got a strong feeling that Celtic will go with the same 11 that started the game on Tuesday, i.e. Sinisalo, Donovan, Carter Vickers, Trusty, Tierney, McGregor, Bauer, Negrin, Duran, and Yang, with Hu up front. If there's injuries, would not be the least bit surprised to see Duran playing centrally, Hassan playing on one wing, Yang on the other, maybe Murray and Trusty as the centre backs, Tierney as the left back, with Ralston as the right back. Johnny Briggs, who needs rested? Well, who certainly has played more football than any other Celtic player at the moment. Although there's an argument to say that Austin Trusty pretty much played all the way through for America in the World Cup, had a couple of weeks off at home in Pittsburgh, and then came back into pre-season training 6 days before, or five days before the first game. So he's not really had a proper break, which was similar to what happened with Alistair Johnson. He had a few more days at Celtic before the first game than Trusty. But Kasper, who had half a season in Norwegian football for Bodø Glimt, because they play spring, summer, autumn. So there is an argument to say that maybe Kasper, who does need to have a game off or half a game off, I put him on the bench for the last 30 minutes. Michael Ross, I would say, you're saying, does Hassan need rested? I would say the opposite. I think Hassan needs to start the game on Saturday. Obviously, that depends a bit on what the physios and the sports scientists and the medical. Gordon Flowers, Kieran, didn't we all? I'm wondering if you maybe saying Kieran didn't do well. I thought Kieran Tierney in the first half looked fine. Kieran Tierney, like Carter Vickers, like many players in the second half, seemed to completely and utterly lose all their energy, all their drive, all their motivation. Whether, as Pat McLaughlin was suggesting, Pat McLaughlin, I think you're saying I'd start Hatton on Saturday instead of Chuneki. I thought, I could be wrong, I thought that Hatton had been loaned out to Ayr for the season. I know there is this agreement that you can get back players back from loan to play for the parent club, but I thought Hatton, I don't think that's allowed with Hatton. So I thought Hatton was actually on loan to Ayr for the season. I could be wrong. Typhoon McFlustery saying, will Derek McInnes survive till Christmas? I would say that he, much like Russell Martin, has got to really turn around Rangers in the next few weeks. I think actually the two Celtic Rangers matches might well be what decides whether McInnes gets an extra few weeks, few months, or whether he's out in his ear. I would not be the least bit surprised if they lose to Celtic in the league match and they lose to Celtic in the League Cup match, that probably could be Derek McInnes' last two games as the Rangers manager. It didn't take them long last season to sack Russell Martin after a terrible, terrible start. And I didn't see the game this evening between Rangers and Jablonec, but the story was that the Rangers were a complete and utter ragbag, disorganized. They had no idea what they were doing. McInnes was making changes right, left, and centre, taking players on, putting players off, changing formations. I don't. You could be right. You could be right. I thought he'd been loaned to Ayr. I'll just have a wee look up and see. According to the transfer site, Thomas Hattons is on loan at Ayr now. So as far as I can see, Hatton has been loaned to Pat McLaughlin. Do we have another Hatton then? Well, my thought is that Hasim Hassan needs to get brought into the side one way or the other now. So for me, as somebody was suggesting earlier on, start him on Saturday against Falkirk, give him the first 60 minutes, bring on Yang, bring on Chinecki, bring on Forrest, etc., to replace him. I think there is some good sense in giving Casper Hu the game off, starting Duran as the centre forward rather than Hu, having Hu on the bench alongside Callum Osman, let's say, if we require a goal late on. Michael Ross saying 50 million and he's made the team worse. Sorry, I was still thinking Celtic rather than Rangers, but yes, McInnes has spent an absolute fortune at Rangers, and you're entirely right. He's made the team worse rather than better. J7 saying how much have Sevco Rangers spent on managers? Surely it's a fair amount. They'll have. They may well still be paying off the contracts of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, Philippe Clement, Danny Rowe left, Stephen Gerrard left, so they wouldn't really be any. They wouldn't have lost any with them. They probably actually would have gained money because there would have been compensation from Aston Villa and from Salzburg. Obviously, sacking Russell Martin, there would have been a big compensation package to Russell Martin. So they probably are still paying off sacking of Brian Bronckhorst, sacking Clement, and sacking Russell Martin. They may well have made some money back by Gerrard being poached to go to Villa and Roll being poached to go to Salzburg, because both of them were under contract at the time when they were poached away. Jane Smith, McInnes won't last past September. Yes, I as I said, my personal feeling is if Celtic do beat them in the two games in September, the league game and then the cup game, which I think are 1 week apart, I would not be the least bit surprised if Celtic beat them in both the games, knock them out the League Cup, and create a big gap between them and Rangers in the league, that much like happened to Russell Martin last season, that he'll be sacked by October time, which was obviously around about the same time as Celtic lost Brendan Rodgers, whether Rodgers resigned or whether he was sacked or whether it was he resigned before he got sacked by Dermot Desmond, etc. Who knows? But the strange thing was both Rangers and Celtic were looking for new managers much at the same time, around about September, October. Yes, Scott Dougal, you want Dell to stay. I think the longer that Derek McInnes stays as the manager of Rangers, the worse they'll get, or certainly it'll take them a long time to get themselves into an actual team. And again, it kind of comes back to what we were also saying about the Celtic capitulation and awful performance in the second half. They stopped playing as a team. It feels like Rangers haven't played as a team all season. And it's just been a bunch of individuals who've got no idea what they're doing and how to play in a team with their new teammates. Strangely, the Doctor, the Rangers have a mystical money tree. It'll be fine. They do seem to be spending yet again money they don't have, which obviously is what bankrupted them back in 2012. Basically, spending more and more and more, a bit like a gambler, laying another bet to pay off the bet that they've just lost. In essence, Rangers seem to be doubling down and doubling down, spending more and more money, and then sacking more and more managers, all of which is very, very expensive. Obviously, to bring in McInnes from Rangers, there would have been quite a big compensation package that went from Rangers to Hearts for that as well. So, James Smith, the thing with the problem the Rangers had last season is they gave Russell Martin a big transfer chest in the summer. They then gave Danny Rowe money that was probably earmarked for this summer's transfer window in January of this year. And then they've obviously given McInnes a massive transfer kitty for this summer, and they don't seem to have. They've sold Diamandi, Diamandi, which is about the only player they've actually sold. And now reportedly they are selling Nico Raskin in the near future, which will probably get them 20 million or something like that. Probably about the same kind of price as Celtic got for Engels. J7, these new Sevco owners have been a gift. I think also one of them recently was found guilty of 3 or 4 crimes in America and had to spend a couple of days in jail as part of the punishment for being found guilty. Can't remember exactly what crimes the person, but he's one of the owners, shareholders in the new Rangers group that has ownership of Leeds and of the San Francisco 49ers NFL side and the Rangers side. He's one of the money people behind all those different things. Robert Duck 67, McInnes said after the match, no offers for Raskin. That strange thing, as I say, of so many transfer stories at the moment involving Rangers and Celtic is that there are stories saying that there are definite bids on the table for Raskin, and it's just waiting to get ratified. But you're quite right. The thing is, the stories never seem to sort of tally up. We've got one story one day, we've got one story the next day, and we've got 4 stories on the same day that all are contradictory and stuff. Frank Gribben, both sets of fans are far too entitled. The glory days are gone, folks. We are the biggest and best team in a very small pond. Replace the board and establish sound recruitment. I would agree with all of those things. I don't think there's any possibility of Celtic's current owners, major shareholders, etc., leaving the club. Possibility that Mackay, the CFO, and Nicholson, the chief executive officer, they both could get sacked because they are employees of Celtic. Although they're on the board, they are executives on the board, thus they're employees. Very difficult to get rid of Dermot Desmond or his son or Wilson, because they're all shareholders on the board. And the only real way to get rid of Dermot Desmond is for someone to buy all his shares off him. And that's going to cost £200 million. And I don't see anybody stumping up £200 million to buy Celtic. However, it would be within the power of Dermot Desmond and the non-executives on the board to sack Nicholson and sack Mackay. One of the questions would then be, if you do sack one or other or both of them, who do you bring in to replace them? Because being a chief executive officer of a football club is a fairly niche job. You have to have a lot of different strings to your bow: legal knowledge, financial knowledge, human resources knowledge, some footballing knowledge, etc. And there aren't many people out there who've got all those different things. Nicholson, if we want to go into his character, was a lawyer for many, many years, quite an esteemed lawyer, apparently quite a successful lawyer, working in business law and criminal law. He then also got a couple of university degrees in business finance. Then was an understudy to Peter Lawwell for about 5-10 years, and then took over from Peter Lawwell as the chief executive officer when Lawwell became the chairman. So on the face of it, Michael Nicholson has all the right kind of skills and training and degrees and knowledge and stuff to do the various different parts of a CEO job. Somebody was suggesting Paul Elliott to be the new chief executive officer. Now, Paul Elliott was a very good Celtic player. He has got involved in football politics, working with the FA on things like racial diversity, gender diversity, LGBTQ issues, etc. But he has absolutely no financial knowledge, absolutely no knowledge of running a football club. And he also got himself into deep financial problems with some very, very bad investments. Again, not very good if part of your role is controlling the finances of a football club. However, maybe a solution to calm the waters and calm the various unhappy supporter groups maybe is to sacrifice one of Nicholson or Mackay and bring in somebody different. I don't know. I'm not personally sure that would actually help things at Celtic, but I do 100% agree Celtic are the best by far in a small pond. Unfortunately, the Scottish pond is getting smaller and smaller at the moment. And I don't think our recruitment is good enough, and I don't think our ability to bring through young players through our academy, be it Scottish, be it Irish, be it English or whatever, I don't think our academy is good enough at bringing through young players into our first team. Sligo boy, good that you're back on. As I said, from my side of the live stream, everything seemed to be completely functioning. So maybe the fault was with your own Wi-Fi or internet, etc. So, but good to have you back on, Sligo. But your comments were coming up on the screen the whole way through. But maybe it's a joke that I don't understand. G7, do we still have David Pleat working for us? To the best of my knowledge, David Pleat left at the same time as Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers seemed to have David Pleat in as some sort of consultant type of thing. So my understanding is that Pleat left the club around the same time, left the club in the summer of 2025 because he was a kind of, as happened quite often at Celtic under Brendan Rodgers, it was a mate of Brendan Rodgers who got a job. There were 2 or 3 of the coaching staff who were mates of Brendan Rodgers. Paul Tidsdale was another person that was a mate of Brendan Rodgers. And I think those were... I think Paul Tisdale, whoever decided to appoint Paul Tisdale, that was for me a massive, massive mistake. So whoever chose to bring in Paul Tidsdale, be it Michael Nicholson, be it Brendan Rodgers, I think that was a really terrible decision. I think it really, really messed up Celtic's academy, recruitment, scouting, transfer policy. I think it made a real mess of many, many key things within Celtic's group. I do think, to be fair, I think Sean Maloney, actually, in the role that he originally had at Celtic before he became assistant manager for Martin O'Neill both those 2 times, I think as a development manager, he actually was a good appointment, and I think he actually that might well be. I think he's actually done a good job from what I can see in terms of the transfer market, in that the scouting and recruitment of Camilo Duran and Miko Bauer were both things that he and O'Neill set in place in January of 2026 when they came back in for the second time. And then because they were still in charge this summer, Celtic then went ahead with the buying Bauer and buying Camilo Duran. And obviously Casper Hu was a player that Celtic had been scouting for the best part of 12 to 18 months. Johnny Briggs, getting back to football, there's some not very football-y comments in the comment section. So, however, Johnny Briggs, Aberdeen will be a hard game for Rangers. That certainly Rangers have tended to have difficult games against Aberdeen over recent years. I do think Aberdeen have actually got a good manager. I think they have recruited reasonably well. They've got a few players that can cause people problems. I think if Rangers are as low in confidence as they seem to be, as in such great disarray and disorganisation as they seem to be, quite right, Nisbet as their centre forward is a player that can score goals, difficult to defend, scores on the ground, scores in the air, scores penalty kicks. So he is a bit of a triple threat as a striker. I certainly do fancy taking on Falkirk in the game on Saturday, rather than having to take on one of the stronger teams. Falkirk last season were a very good side, which is why they got into the top 6 and they got into the post-split top 6 fixtures. I think they have lost a lot of their better players, many of whom were on loan. Doesn't look like John McGlynn's been able to replace some of the players that he had to sell and the players that he had loaned in. I don't think he's been able to replace them with the same quality. Obviously, they lost Calvin Miller to Hearts. He was one of their best players last season. say 3 or 4 of their players were on loan from other clubs in around England and so on. James Smith, the boy from Chelsea, replaced Pete. I think my understanding was the guy who used to be one of the head scouts at Chelsea was kind of brought in effect to be to take over the scouting department in the longer run. I think he's kind of taken over more so from the role that Paul Tidsdale had. So I think he's kind of whatever role Paul Tidsdale was supposed to have, but also overseeing the scouting department. And I do think that Sean Maloney has taken a stronger interest in the transfer and recruitment team than previous assistant managers such as John Kennedy, etc. took. J7, Calvin Miller was the engine in that Falkirk team. I thought he was was a good player for them. And had Celtic signed him back to be left back, left midfield, etc., midfielder player, I wouldn't have been against that either. Obviously, he started his career at Celtic. He's been one of the Hearts players that has played generally pretty well for them so far this season. Johnny Briggs, Calvin Ramsey on loan to the Saints is a good one from Liverpool. Yes, obviously he had a super career before he went to Liverpool. He's very, very promising young right back. Moving to Liverpool seems on the face of it to be a good move, but he hardly got to play for Liverpool. I think quite a lot of injury problems. He had some time out on loan. I think he's an interesting player to follow. Theoretically, possibly, his career at Liverpool has kind of died. So I do wonder whether maybe this time next year he could be someone that Celtic have a look at. If he has a particularly good season on loan for St Mirren. I would doubt that St Mirren have got the money to buy Calvin Ramsey. Yes, quite right, J7. He has had quite a lot of injuries in his Liverpool time. I think that's curtailed his career. I think also he had quite a number of better right backs to fight off Trent Alexander, and now obviously Jeremy Frimpong, the ex-Celtic player, sometimes playing at right back, sometimes playing all over the place. However, if Ramsey was to have a good season at St Mirren, I think he might be someone that Celtic could look at because he would fit also the Scottish trained quota thing for UEFA rules. Yes, Liverpool ruined Ramsey. I think it was J7 was saying injury problems at Liverpool, but also he kind of got frozen out and put in the lower teams and sent out on loan and stuff. So I think that's also ruined his career. Good night to you, Kieran Allen. It's been lovely to have you on. We'll be doing another live stream, all things being equal, if all things go to plan, next Thursday. So we'll see you again next Thursday. It's been great to have had you on. One or two odd comments back and forward going on in the comment section. Ronnie McNairney, will who be fit for the weekend? It's a really, really good question. I was hoping that there would be some form of training ground footage from today. It may be that Celtic used the Thursday as the debriefing day, the tactical day, analysing the game from Tuesday evening. So it may be that today was a day which was in the watching the videos, watching the analysis, watching all the feedback from the various analysts and sports scientists about the number of passes that were missed, the number of challenges that were missed, percentages of shots on goal, etc., etc. In the I don't think from the half-time whistle onwards, Celtic had a single shot on goal in the second half or in the 30 minutes of extra time. We did get the ball down the bottom end a few times in that time, but unfortunately, I don't think we actually got a shot on goal. We had a couple of corners down there, but we didn't really get any kind of dangerous ball in the box. Yes, J7, I would agree with that. Addressed home and played Duran through the middle against Falkirk. I think that is Duran's best position. I think also Duran and who would work very well as a 1-2 partnership up front. A wee bit similar to what Celtic had with Sutton and Larsson, or Hartson and Larsson. Bigger guy and smaller guy. I think Celtic could easily go for the rest of the season in a 3-5-2, a 5-3-2, a 4-4-2, something along those lines, or having Nygren as playing behind those two as an attacking midfielder. I do think Celtic actually, if we keep this bunch of players together, plus add in a few more for upgrades and for quality depth, so that if we do lose a player to injury, the person coming in is as good or as nearly as good as the person they're replacing. I don't think we've got that in too many positions. Last season, we lost Alistair Johnston. We eventually got in Julian Arroyo, who for me was nearly as good as Alistair Johnston, and in some ways better than Alistair Johnston. That's the kind of thing we need to do, is we need to have somebody who can take the place of someone who's injured or out of form and be as good, if not better than them, or take their place and be so good that they can't lose their first choice player team place. Michael Ross, who needs a goal? Yes. Well, he did score 3 against Kilmarnock. He did look dangerous in the first leg against LASK. He did have 3 good chances in the first half of the game against LASK on Tuesday. On a serious note, David, who is your favourite Celtic squad? I think the thing about if I was picking my Celtic favourite team, it would be an amalgamation of various different players. Some of my favourite players of all time for Celtic in relatively recent years. Absolutely loved Artur Buric, the Polish goalkeeper, as our goalkeeper. I think really like Michael Lustig. I really like Alistair Johnston. Massive fan of Bobo Baldi. Virgil van Dijk was brilliant for us for a couple of seasons. Maybe at left back, really like Kieran Tierney, Scott Brown in the midfield, Paul Lambert, Neil Lennon, Shinsuke Nakamura, Lubomir Moravcik. Up front, Dalglish, Larsson, Hutton, Sutton, Hartson, etc. Really liked Didier Agat when Didier Agat played for Celtic. Really liked Jota at his best. Big fan of Leo Labada. I thought how well he came into Scottish football as a 19-year-old inexperienced Israeli player, and really played very, very well for the first couple of seasons. Really liked him. Liked Daisamida, liked Kyogo. So for me, it's probably an amalgamation of lots of different players from lots of different eras. But all-time favourite players that Celtic have played when I've been watching, really, really loved Ken Dalglish. Really, really loved Henrik Larsson. Massive fan of Shinsuke Nakamura. Massive fan of Lubomir Moravcik. Jim F4194, the 1967 team. Yep. Well, when Celtic won the Celtic won the European Cup in May of '67. I was 2 months away from being born, so I have absolutely no memory of the Lisbon Lion teams other than watching the various different videos and films and documentaries, etc. By the time I started watching football and supporting Celtic would be about 1971, by which time most of the half or more of the Lisbon Lions had retired. And it was starting to be the Quality Street kids like Davy Hay, George Connolly, Dalglish, McGrain, Macari, etc., that were coming through, plus favourite players like Dixie Deans and Harry Hood, Paul Wilson, who, when I was a boy of 4 or 5, were the Celtic players of the time, which is kind of why Kenny Dalglish was my all-time, it was and is my all-time favourite player, just ahead of Henrik Larsson, because he obviously was Celtic's young up-and-coming star player when I started supporting Celtic in 71, 72. Kenneth Todd, okay, David, we got kicked out of the Champions League by LASK, but how would we have performed up against the real big hitters of Europe? We dodged a bullet, really, and we could have been humiliated on the big stage. I get your point. I think if we look back to the last time Celtic were in the Champions League, which was obviously the 24-25 season under Brendan Rodgers, when we were pre-qualified on the basis of Scotland's UEFA ranking, we did a pretty decent job of coming through that qualifying campaign. We ran Bayern Munich very close. I think Celtic's team, this Celtic squad, once it settled down and got a team spirit cohesion and got his confidence back, I think is probably the equal of that team that Rodgers had. I think Hassan has the ability, the talent to be as good, if not better, than Kuhn. I think Hu and Duran have got the talent and the ability to be better than Kyogo was at that time. Replacing Dice and Maida is difficult, which is probably why it's going to be a mixture of Hu, Duran, and Hassan that replaces them. I'm really hopeful we get up an Engel-style midfielder into the midfield, partly because I do think Mika Bauer is a good midfielder, but I think we need to have someone stronger with more energy because of the fact that Callum McGregor's energy levels, endurance, and fitness is starting to go downhill for me. So I get your point. But the Celtic team that beat LASK 3-0 in the first leg of that game, I think it could easily have gone into this Champions League and got through to the knockout phase, much like we did a couple of seasons ago in the 24-25 season. This is my personal opinion, and I think part of the difficulty Celtic have now, like they had last season, was we had last season quite a number of players coming into the side that weren't really bedded down, and the existing players who already were at Celtic didn't step up and perform. And then this season, I do think that Hu and Duran were into the club, settled down, but they substantially underperformed, and the other midfielders that Celtic had didn't step up to help Bauer, who's maybe still finding his feet, and the other wide players haven't stepped up and performed to allow Hassan to come into the team gradually. I think also probably the Carter-Vickers and Trusty partnership is again taking a bit of time to get re-established. I think the fact that we lost Alison Johnston almost straight away this season has also been counterproductive as well, because I do think if Celtic had played week in, week out, Johnston, Carter-Vickers, Trusty, Tierney, with Scales as the backup and Donovan as the backup on the other side, I think that would have if we'd played that set of 4 players week after week after week after week, I don't see personally Celtic capitulating like they did on Tuesday had Alistair Johnston been in the side, because he is one person who really does get Celtic fired up and would have been a loud voice to I think Callum McGregor is a relatively quiet captain, and reportedly Carter Vickers is relatively quiet on the pitch. Kieran Tierney is quite a quiet person on the pitch as well. And I think we did need somebody to get everybody fired up and everybody back on the same page. And Johnson's like that. Kasper Schmeichel was like that. Joe Hart was like that in the past. Interestingly, a lot of people said that Greg Taylor was quite a team leader on the pitch and off the pitch. And again, obviously, Greg Taylor's gone as well. So it did feel to me that on Tuesday, there was a lack of leaders on the pitch to take things by the scruff of the neck, the kind of thing you would expect had we still had him, that Neil Lennon, Paul Lambert, Scott Brown would have done. Great to have had you on, Jim F4194. Oops, sorry. J7, question to the chat and to yourself, David. If we were to be offered to leave the Scottish League to go to the English League, would you take the offer? Good point. Sligo Boy, what is the offer? It would take Celtic at least 1 billion to appease the dissenters. I think in some ways that moving into some form of British Super League funded by Sky Sports and Amazon and TNT Sports, HBO Max, I can certainly see that as being a definite thing for the future. Given the fact that Celtic's got a 60,000 stadium, Rangers got a 45,000 stadium, I think they've both got a global fan base as well. I think they're both would be attractive options for the English Premier League or some form of British Super League. If Celtic were to be given the massive TV money that a Bournemouth or a Brentford or a Crystal Palace, etc., get, Bournemouth have got a stadium capacity of something like 13,000-14,000. It's a tiny ground, a tiny catchment area for people, but they have got money to absolute millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds guaranteed every year from their massive TV contract, plus bigger sponsorship deals, bigger prize money, all these things. So I think moving to the English Premier League, which is impossible because Celtic and Rangers are Scotland and can't play in an English league without giving up the fact that they're Scottish. And Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland are all 5 separate countries in terms of UEFA. So again, it's not a possibility. But I do think possibly, maybe whilst I'm still alive, maybe whilst some of you are still alive, there is. I can certainly see some form of European Super League coming into being because of the power of television and the power of money in UEFA and FIFA, so that in maybe 10 years' time, 20 years' time, Celtic and Rangers will be in some kind of pan-European league where rather than playing Hearts and Aberdeen and St Mirren and Kilmarnock, etc., instead we'll be playing against Ajax Amsterdam one week and then Bruges the next week. It's a bit like how the Champions League is, but much more of a structured, proper league with maybe 3 or 4 divisions and promotion and relegation between all these different things. And I think because of Celtic's 60,000 stadium, which is actually quite rare in terms of other football clubs in Britain, and the massive global fan base that Celtic's got, I think Celtic could cope in that sort of league because they would have so much money, plus they would have 60,000 stadium, which would be very attractive for sponsors and merchandising and all these things. Slagger Boy saying, I asked AI who the most viable club in the world is. The answer I was given was for Europe, Celtic is number one for the first time. The key word was viable. It's an interesting point. I'll maybe have a look and see myself, and if I put into the Chat GPT AI thing that I've got on my computer through Microsoft, what answer it comes up with. But Celtic, unlike virtually any other football club that I know of in the world, has supporters pretty much everywhere in the world. We've got a big fan base in Australia, big fan base in New Zealand, big fan base in America, Canada. We've got big fan bases across Europe. We've also got fan bases in Japan and South Korea. Basically, wherever Scottish people or Irish people went to, there are Celtic supporter groups. And somebody said something along the lines of, there are more Celtic supporter groups and more sort of Celtic fan bars and pubs for Celtic than any other football team. I think another team that has this global, Rangers actually do have a global presence as well, much like Celtic, although not quite so big as Celtic. Liverpool's another one, again, a club with, obviously, again, Irish roots and English roots with Liverpool as well. So interesting question. I do think Celtic do have a disadvantage in many ways because we are playing in Scotland, which means TV money is very, very low, prize money is low, merchandising, sponsorship, all these things are much lower than they would be if we were playing in Spain, France, Italy, Germany, or the English Premier League, which is why maybe in time a pan-European league rather than domestic league might be where Celtic and Rangers end up because of their big fan base, because of their fame and fortune and notoriety, plus the fact that they've got big stadiums, which is a big draw for big powerful teams coming to visit for away games. And obviously, if Celtic were playing, let's say, against Liverpool in the European League, Celtic could easily take 20, 30,000 fans down for a game at Anfield or down to the Emirates or to Old Trafford or whatever to have a proper away game. So Kenneth Todd saying, yes, going to the English Championship a year, maybe two, then maybe in the English Premier League, 2 years then, top six of the EPL, fighting a better fight in Europe. Now, that's certainly, it's a very interesting analogy, or because I have watched a few YouTube channels where people have run the models on things like Championship Manager, Football Manager, etc., running through plugging Celtic and Rangers into the English Premier League or the English Championship and seeing where Rangers and Celtic are in 10 years' time. And you're quite right. The most of the models I've ever seen or computer simulations have Celtic entering the English Premier League for the first season or two, being towards the bottom but surviving, but then in years 3, 4, 5, going further and further up the league, and after about 10 years being up there alongside Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Chelsea, etc., challenging for the title and challenging for the European places. Slaggerboy, the viability was basically the cash in hand reserves that we have comparable to all other European clubs, with most Man United, Barcelona, Milan's, etc. being in the red, and our financial fair play is sound too. One of the difficulties Celtic does sort of run into in terms of financial fair play, potentially, is the fact that because our wage budget is significantly higher for a team that's not a Champions League team, i.e. we're a Europa League team, but we've got a Champions League equivalent budget. So we're actually, our wage budget is that a bit higher. And obviously, if we're not in the Champions League, rather than getting 10 to 20 million pounds in prize money from the Europa League, we would have been getting 30 to 40 million pounds prize money from the Champions League. So we're about 20 million pounds down with that. So all these things do have a knock-on effect about having your wage budget and your transfer budget spendings being 70% of your internal your revenues that come into the club. Because 2 years in a row we've lost out on 20 million pounds that we were kind of budgeting to have, it's got a knock-on effect because the wage budget has gone up and up and up and up over the seasons, to the point where Celtic's got the biggest wage budget by far in Scotland. Not as big a wage budget as the Bournemouths and the Brentfords and stuff in England, because they've got the benefit of the massive Sky contract and all the other football contracts, the TV contracts they've got. Gordon Flowers, all the way from Australia, and Super Millwall. That's my English team. Well, it's an interesting football team to have in England. My English football team that I follow when I'm not following Celtic is Liverpool, mostly for the reason that there were obviously strong links between the Liverpool of the 60s and 70s with Jock Stein and Bill Shankly. Then obviously my number one favourite player at Celtic was Kenny Dalglish when I was a wee boy, and when I was about the age of 10 or so, he moved from Celtic to Liverpool. So I started supporting Liverpool because my favourite player had gone to play for them. And since the mid-late 70s, when Dalglish moved to Liverpool, Liverpool's been my number two team to support in world football. But when Celtic have played Liverpool over the years, I've been 100% behind Celtic and calling the Liverpool players all the names under the sun. Johnny Briggs, it's a really good philosophical question. I'm not massively sure where Celtic's weakest point is. The thing for me about everything within a football team is it's the football team. So obviously players can have super talent and amazing talent, but as LESK proved, as a lot of football teams prove, Kierat Almaty last season, if a team plays as a team and they're all playing on the same tactical metaphorical hymn sheet, and they're all playing and doing what they're told to do, and they're all playing for each other, the sum of all those lesser parts becomes a much stronger thing. And I think one of the problems that Celtic have got in terms of their back four is we've had a lot of chopping and changing, mostly because Carter Vickers, Tierney, and Alistair Johnston have all had a lot of injury problems. Trusty did have some injury problems at the start of last season. So I do think that's part of it. I think Trusty and Scales, once they get playing with each other on a regular basis and form a proper partnership, they could be a very strong one. I think Carter Vickers is still maybe about 75-80% of the Carter Vickers that we had before he got his first injury. So the first couple of seasons of Carter Vickers, I think he's about 75-80% of that. Johnny Briggs saying Vickers is done. I'm not massively. I wouldn't write off Cameron Carter Vickers just yet. I think if he has regular football, regains the strength, the pace, the endurance, which is all perfectly possible, because he did have the best part of 10 months out of football, recovering from his Achilles tendon operation. And prior to that, he had a lot of problems with his knees and his calf muscles and his thigh muscles, etc., and his hamstrings. So, and another player that maybe, hopefully, gets back to where he was at his best is Jota. As I said, the indications are he maybe seems to have maybe 2 or 3 weeks ahead of what was supposed to be his recovery time. So we're maybe going to see him coming back in October rather than back in November, because he is back into full fitness training with Celtic and is now doing ball skill training with Celtic as well. So that's a couple of weeks ahead of what his schedule was supposed to be. Pat McLaughlin saying you liked Milan when you were small. Fair enough. As I said, the reason I started supporting Liverpool was simply because my number one favourite player of the time moved from Celtic to Liverpool. So I started watching out for how Dalglish did for Liverpool. And obviously at Liverpool, he was just as good as he had been at Celtic. One of the record scorers of all time at Celtic, one of the record scorers of all time at Liverpool. Then obviously, which is something that we probably don't see hardly at all these days, he went on for a couple of seasons to be player manager of Celtic, of Liverpool, and took them to cups and leagues and stuff. Johnny Briggs saying our best defender since Virgil is the boy we sold to Brentford. Yep, Christopher Ayer. I think he was a big loss to Celtic. Again, he was like one of several players who decided that Celtic wasn't a big enough club for him anymore, and he wanted to go and play in a bigger league. So he moved down to Brentford. Wee bit similar to Ryan Christie moving from Celtic to Bournemouth. Odsonne Edouard moving down south. Moussa Dembele moving down south. Engels has done it. O'Reilly's done it. So we've had a lot of players who've come into Celtic for a few seasons and then gone off down to England. Hopefully Celtic soon gets back to being one of the clubs that really talented younger players choose to come to as a stepping stone to the bigger leagues. I'm slightly worried that Celtic don't seem to be able to attract that sort of player at the moment. And it does appear from what Martin O'Neill has said and what several transfer player agents have talked about, that the being in the Champions League now is very, very important for many players. Can't remember which person was saying it, but apparently there were 3 or 4 players that had been offered to Celtic to come in if Celtic got through the qualifier on Tuesday. Not certain whether Nico Sugur is one of those, not certain whether Gavidis Giannaitis and Armin Mamic were all those players, but there certainly were, supposedly people said there were 3 or 4 players that were lined up to come to Celtic, according to their agents, assuming that that they got into the Champions League, which of course, second year in a row we haven't done. We've failed at the last hurdle. Whether next season, because great to have you on, Pork Chop Express. Lovely to have you on. Whamming CSC. Do you think we'll take the Europa League seriously? There's no reason why we shouldn't look to recruit well for it. Yes, I really hope that Celtic, and it's very much in their interests, particularly because, and again, hopefully this is not me being overconfident or whatever the word is, complacent. I think Celtic already have a good enough squad to win the Scottish League and win both the Scottish Cups this season with what we've got at the moment, assuming that we don't have terrible injuries and assuming we don't lose 3 or 4 players in the last week of the transfer windows. But assuming that we have got this squad, assuming that Hassan, Bauer, Duran all settle down really well into Celtic football, as Hu and Duran seem to have done up until what they did on Tuesday. I think we've got, so cut a long story short, YMCAC, I think Celtic should take the Europa League seriously. I think a lot of the teams in the Europa League are going to be much the same quality. And it then comes down to who plays better as a team, whose star players maybe have a particularly good game, much like the way that Duran and Hu did against LSK in the first game, where Duran scored 2 super goals, Negan scored a super goal, who did a great job leading the line, holding the ball up, winning free kicks, as an out ball for the defence to clear themselves and take the pressure off. So I do think Celtic have got, if they get their act together, if they hold this squad together and make a few good additions in the last 8 days, 7-8 days, I do think they should take the Europa League seriously, because as Rangers proved 3 seasons ago, can't remember. I don't tend to remember many things about Rangers, but the Giovanni van Bronckhorst Rangers team got all the way to the final, lost to Eintracht Frankfurt on penalties. And if Rangers could do it a few seasons ago, and Rangers got to the last 8, I think, again a couple of years ago, Celtic definitely can do the same. Kieran Allen, defence needs to start further up the park. Midfield's paperweight. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying there. I think Celtic do. Now, Mika Bauer has got the reputation for being a wee bit of a, despite the fact he's only 5'8", of being a wee bit like Billy Bremner. For anybody who's as old as me, Billy Bremner obviously was a massively important player for Leeds and for Scotland way back in the early mid-70s. He was about 5'4", 5'5", but he was a tremendous sort of midfield terrier type of person. He could tackle people, kick people. He was relatively able to create things. Now, Mika Bauer at 5'8" is supposed to be that sort of player. He actually is a good defender, a good tackler, a good at recovering the ball and recycling the ball and all these kind of things. Whether Celtic use him that way, I don't know, because, as I say, at 5'8", he is quite small for that sort of role. So that's why I would like a bigger, stronger midfielder, like a Genetius, like a Nico Sugur, who are both 6 foot plus, to be in our midfield, to be more of the sort of the hard man that we used to have with people like Scott Brown, Neil Lennon, Victor Manyama, etc. Like Ross saying, Tommy Burns was his favourite player. I think I like Tommy Burns as a player. I really liked him as a human being as well. I think he was a bit unlucky to be the Celtic manager at the wrong time. He was the Celtic manager when Rangers were very, very strong, and were spending money hand over fist and money they didn't have, which led to their bankruptcy several years later. But that was kind of the time where Rangers were spending so much money on managers, players, transfers, contracts, etc. It was driving itself deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. Scott Dougal saying Jimmy Greaves. Yep. Again, I've only ever seen Jimmy Greaves playing on things like Match of the Day or whatever the ITV version was of that, but sort of the game of the week sort of thing. My granddad was a big fan of Jimmy Greaves. Kieran Allen also going for Jimmy Greaves. So Jimmy Greaves was an absolutely stupendous player, a wee bit similar to Gary Lineker. A lot of people didn't rate him because the accusation for Jimmy Greaves, the accusation for Gary Lineker was all they do is score goals, which is part of the reason that Jimmy Greaves wasn't playing in the 1966 World Cup run under Alf Ramsey. It was Geoff Hurst, because Geoff Hurst gave a lot more to the team than Jimmy Greaves. Jimmy Greaves just scored the goal, while Geoff Hurst did a much better job of linking everything up. Kieran Allen saying Jimmy Greaves could brag any keeper without hitting the ball hard. Now, again, as I said, my granddad was a massive fan of Jimmy Greaves. He talked about Jimmy Greaves kind of passing the ball into the net. He never used a lot of force in his shooting. It was precision finishing, kind of passing the ball into the net past the goalkeeper. Really, really skillful player. Absolutely stupendous as a goal scorer. Again, I've only ever seen him actually on video and film and TV programs and stuff. Johnny Briggs, the only reason we're talking about favourite players is someone was talking about who my favourite players have been playing for Celtic, and then it's broadened out to talking about other people's favourite players. And I think it's perfectly reasonable talking about, as well as being Celtic fans, we are actually football fans. I, as I say, support Liverpool as well as I support Liverpool and I support Celtic. I support Celtic first by far, but I do support Liverpool. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to talk about European football, English football, British football, as well as talking about Celtic. But if people only want to talk about Celtic, I'm also entirely happy talking only about Celtic. Jimmy McGrory's stats were incredible. Didn't he score more goals than he played? He certainly only he scored something along those lines. So, according to this, it says Jimmy McGrory scored 395 goals in 378 games and league games, and 73 goals in 67 Scottish Cups. Total of 468 goals in 445 Celtic games. So, yes, completely right. Jimmy McGrory scored more than a goal a game. Absolutely incredible. His goals per game, obviously, better than a goal a game. That puts him up in all-time football players all over the world, right at the very, very top of the table. And if he's not at the very top of the table, he must be up in the first 2 or 3 for goals per game. Incredible, scoring over 400 goals, also having a career that lasted 400 games. So more than a goal a game, which is absolutely incredible. But he hardly ever played for Scotland during that time. Which is also rather surprising. Now, admittedly, they didn't play quite so many internationals back in his day, but he still played a tiny number of international and national games. Oops. Johnny Briggs, best fullback, Danny McGrain. Yep, Danny McGrain. Again, obviously, he was a player that was starting his Celtic career, or was very early in his Celtic career when I started supporting in 1971, 1972. He was a Celtic player all his career, then part of Celtic's backroom staff. He was an absolutely stupendous player, a really, really good team player, really, really good fullback. In his day, probably right up there as being one of the best fullbacks in the whole of world football. Possibly had he been playing for an English club or an Italian club or whatever, he probably would have been rated as the best in the world, simply because of the greater exposure he would have got playing in a bigger, in a more visible team. But undoubtedly, McGrain right up there. Yep, Jim McGrory still has the bigger track for the most goals scored by a player at one club, 400 goals. I don't know if this is correct or not. I got a funny feeling that somebody that play there was, I'm sure, like someone like Pele playing for Santos in Brazil, and I'm pretty sure there was like an Argentinian or a Uruguayan had a similar record of scoring an incredible number of goals for one team. But whether Jimmy McGrory is first, second, third in that table, to be up alongside a player like Pelly for the number of goals for one team is incredible. And Jimmy McGrory, unbelievable scoring record for Celtic. Yep. So something like 468 in 445 is what the internet's saying. J7, can you imagine a prime Jinky and Jota on our wings together? It would be brilliant if we could produce another Jinky Jimmy Johnston winger. I don't, and particularly if that Jinky Jimmy Johnston player was also Scottish, because again, it would help so many other different aspects of Celtic if we had a really, really, really top quality Scottish player in our squad. And we don't really have at the moment a really, really top level Scottish player other than Kieran Tierney in our squad. And with Tierney, there's always the worry with fitness, endurance, and injury. I think McGregor, similarly, what is a really very, very good Scottish player, but again, he, for me, is starting to really struggle in terms of energy, fitness, and avoiding proper injury. Kieran Allen's thinking that he said he'd rather have Bobby Lennox than Jinky. Well, you're quite right. We did have them. They won lots and lots of trophies. They won 9 leagues in a row. They won the European Cup. Absolutely brilliant. Yes, James Smith, McGrory is the greatest goal scorer in UK history. However, I'm just trying to indicate that from I'm pretty sure Pelé scored an incredible number of goals for Santos in Brazil. So I was just kind of expanding the pool. Yeah, so just for the example, Pelé scored 643 goals in 659 games for Santos in Brazilian football. McGrory, the greatest goal scorer in British footballing history, Pelé scored 640 odd goals in almost a goal a game. For Santos, actually, probably so scored more goals in more games, but that's not in any way diminishing Jimmy McGrory's place as the greatest ever goal scorer in Scottish football history, the greatest ever goal scorer in goals per game, etc., in terms of British football, and certainly up there in the top. Pat McLaughlin Romario says he scored 1,000 goals. Yes, because Romario played for a lot of different teams, he did score that. Pelé ended up scoring 1,000 goals because he played for other teams as well as Santos. He played quite a number of games. He scored obviously a lot of goals for Brazil. He scored goals for other people, but he scored, as I say, 640 odd for one club. Johnny Briggs saying, why is there a lack of centre-half leaders at Celtic? It's a good question. That obviously in the good old days, Billy McNeil captained very, very effectively from that position. One does think if we had if he was still, if he was now born again and playing football nowadays, Roy Aitken might have been that sort of leader from that central position, although Aitken obviously did play in other positions for Celtic and for Scotland. It doesn't seem like Celtic have a dominant, strong leadership at centre back. Theoretically, Carmen Cart-Vickers, I think, is the official vice captain at Celtic, but from what I've been told, he's not a particularly vocal or noisy person on the pitch. Not really someone who organises the back four and gets them all in the right line and gets them playing all well for offside and stuff. J7 asking if McStay was playing in this era, how much do you think he'd be worth? You're saying 80 million with the amount of money that Man City paid for the guy Anderson, and the amount of money these days to pay for player transfer fees. The fact that McStay would have been coming from Scottish football to go and play in another bigger, richer league, probably because he's playing in Scotland, he probably would bring his transfer fee down. But let's say McStay was playing for the sake of example, playing for Nottingham Forest, and he was going to be bought by Liverpool or by Man United or Man City. We're certainly talking him being a £100 million player, possibly with him moving from Celtic to England or to Italy or whatever. Probably his fee comes down simply because players don't get sold for that much money if they're playing for a Scottish club. Michael Ross saying, what would McGrain be worth now? Again, defenders tend to get not such big transfer fees, but certainly 30, 40, 50 million. He would be the amounts of money that Celtic have had some super players. You think about what would if Kenny Dalglish was a Celtic player now, how much would Liverpool have to pay for him now to get him to move from Celtic to Liverpool? It was 440,000 in the late 70s. We're talking probably to buy Dalglish from Celtic now to go to Liverpool or whomever, we'd be talking 80, 90 million, 100 million because of how good Dalglish was for Celtic. But we'll never ever know, because all those players were players in the good old days where transfer fees were hundreds of thousands, not 100+ million, as unfortunately is the case nowadays. The transfer market is just stupid. Can't remember who bought him, but the chap Delap just got sold for £50 million. For me, Casper Who is twice the player easily that Rory, I think it's Rory Delap or whatever his name is, Delap is, but he's been sold in the last day or two for £50 million. The transfer fees moving within English clubs or moving from English clubs to European clubs is absolutely stupid. Yep. You're entirely right, Michael Ross. I was just about to say that myself. McStay was supposedly close to moving to play for, I think it was one of the Milan clubs or for Juventus. He chose to remain loyal to Celtic, which was very, very, very good of him. He spent his whole long career at Celtic. He was a super player for Celtic for all those years. He came into Celtic aged 18. He was one of several players that got put into the first team at a very young age, and it very much he prospered in the team. Obviously, people like McGrain, Dalglish made their debuts for Celtic as young men as well. Not something we seem to do these days. The last really young player that got to play for Celtic on a regular basis was Kieran Tierney, back 10 years ago, who came in when he was about 18, 19 and became a first-team starter. Yep, J7, what would you do for Danny McGrain in our squad now? I think McGrain would be, given the way that he played as a fullback, he was a very good defender, but he could bomb forward, he could be creative, he could pass, he could cross. Wasn't the best goal scorer, but then that's not really what you're supposed to do as a fullback. But creative player, created goals, defended very well, could step into midfield, could bomb past to be a sort of a wing-back, full-back type of role as well. Super player. He was sort of a modern-day player. playing 50 years ago. Oops. Wyoming CSC. Apparently, McAvenny was a very good player, the most frequently used on only excuse character. Frank McAvenny scored a good number of goals for Celtic. I never liked him as a human being, as a person. I like him even less now as a human being and a person, now that he's doing his podcast, because 19 times out of 20, what he says about Celtic is rather bitchy and moany and negative about Celtic. And I think a lot of what he talks about, what he says and what he talks about is also very ill-informed and very poorly reasoned. J7, love King Kenny. He still talks about Celtic with fondness. I think that's entirely right. I think he retained a lifelong love of Celtic. He wasn't terribly successful when he came back to be Celtic's caretaker manager or director of football alongside John Barnes, but Kieran Allen, honestly, Danny McGrain would walk into any football team in the world. Completely agree. Wherever he was playing for, he would be a first choice player, and he would be a star player. Kieran Allen, Bobby Lennox would make Mbappe look like a little old boy. I think one of the also things, fortunately or unfortunately, is football's quite different nowadays than it was 50 years ago when I first started watching and supporting football. I think absolutely no doubt at all, McGrain, Lennox, Johnston, Dalglish, etc., would be superstars nowadays, simply because they were so talented. I think they also would have adapted to play modern football, which is different from how it was in the old days. If you think about if I think about the sorts of tackles that players could get away with in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Nowadays, you hardly touch a player and you get yellow carded. You slightly miss time a challenge and you end up getting red carded. So I think whoever was playing football nowadays would have to change the way that, particularly defenders and midfielders, would completely have to change the way that they defend and tackle and win the ball back. Tackling and winning the ball back isn't quite so prevalent or frequent in modern day football. A really well-timed tackle these days is kind of a thing of the past. Nowadays in football, there's a lot more intercepting of the ball and blocking the ball rather than actually a proper, real tackle that takes man and ball and leaves the player who's been tackled with a sore ankle or a sore Achilles tendon or a sore foot. Nowadays, the challenges that people used to do to Jimmy Johnson at the start of a game or Bobby Lennox at the start of the game would be completely and totally outlawed. Yes, Johnny Briggs. I think all the players we've been talking about had a winner's mentality as well. So they were fighters as well as talent, which is why I think all those players that we're talking about, McGrain, Dalglish, or Jimmy Greaves, etc., all those players would be superstars nowadays, simply because of their talent, but also their underlying personality, mentality, fighting spirit, team spirit, professionalism, etc. And obviously, all of them would be multimillionaires. Yes. Bobby Lennox met James Forrest last year. It would bring a tear to your eye. The two most decorated players in Celtic's history. Yep. I think if Callum McGregor plays another couple of seasons for Celtic, he might well overtake both Lennox and James Forrest in the table. Because I don't think James Forrest will be playing past the end of the season anymore for Celtic, and he has said on several occasions he's not going to play for anybody else apart from Celtic. So I could easily see him retiring in May of 2027, and then probably going into Celtic's backroom staff as either as a player ambassador or maybe part of the scouting team or coaching team, etc. Oops. Yep, it's a Martin D. Forich. It's a different game now. Probably better no hatchet men who were instructed to hurt players. People like Tom Forsyth, the Rangers, real hatchet men. You got Ron Chopper Harris of Chelsea, Tommy Smith of Liverpool, but there were basically Norman Hunter of Leeds. There were so many players in that era who were basically players who made their reputation kicking players, and in the first 2 or 3 minutes they would go after the winger. If they were playing as a fullback, they would go after the winger and stamp on their foot, kick them in the Achilles tendon area, kick them in the calf, etc., to slow them down. So it's not something that's allowed anymore. Hail to you as well, Michael Ross. Lovely to have had you on. Bedtime for you. Take care. I'm glad you've enjoyed the show. As I said a wee bit earlier on, at this point, I'm very much planning another live stream next Thursday. If I get my dates right, that's going to be a few hours after the second transfer window shuts. We also will know by that point what Celtic's Europa League squad is, so there'll be plenty of things to talk about next Thursday in a live stream. J7 saying, David, was it true that back in the 2010s, Alex Ferguson wanted James Forrest at Man United? Haven't actually read that story. It would make a lot of sense. Alex Ferguson, obviously in his Aberdeen days, was a big one for wingers who played on the wing. He obviously in his Aberdeen side that was so successful in Scottish and then later European football. He had Gordon Strachan playing as a sort of conventional, standard, old-fashioned right winger. So entirely reasonable that he would then look to replace Gordon Strachan as he got older and played more and more centrally for then Man United, but particularly for Leeds. To bring, I didn't see. Certainly, my recollection is that. That Paul McStay had several offers to go and play in England and in Italy. He turned them down. Forrest had offers to play in England and in Europe. McGregor had several offers to play in England in particular and turned those down. James Smith, 7459, Jinky or Best. David, my slight problem is, as I said, started supporting Celtic in 1971, 1972. By that time, I think injuries, etc., were starting to catch up a bit with Jimmy Johnson. So I don't really remember probably what were his best days playing for Celtic, because by the time I started supporting Celtic, his games per season and his quality of his games was slightly dropping off. From watching all the videos and films and TV programs and stuff about him, Jimmy Johnson in his day was absolutely stupendous. Again, by the time I started watching football on a regular basis, George Best, who was another immensely talented player, again, he was starting to for his injuries, and also in George Best's case, his lifestyle to catch up with him. Yep. Martin, imagine if Martin O'Neill didn't have a bad game when we scouted him, he would have ended up in the Celtic shirt. That's perfectly reasonable, perfectly possible. Reportedly, and I'm sure this is the case, a lifelong Celtic fan. You're entirely right, Johnny Briggs. It's obvious watching the game, they've outfought us. It wasn't about skill. They kept winning the ball. No, I completely agree. In the second half, they did a million times better at winning the ball, but what's more, retaining the ball as well. When Celtic did have the ball, they gave the ball away all the whole second half. They gave away the ball, which just invited more and more and more and more and more pressure on themselves. And it was a lack of fight, a lack of team spirit, a lack of team cohesion, a lack of organization, a lack of leadership, as well as a lack of fight. So I think lack of fight, yep. But as part of that also was lack of tactics, lack of leadership, lack of adaptability, lack of someone taking the game and everything by the scruff of the neck and changing it. Got a strong feeling that a Lennon, a Lambert, a McNeil, an Aitken, etc., would have sorted things out on the pitch. And McGregor, for me, was massively lacking in that. James Smith, best Scottish manager, Jock Stein by a mile. Did it in a man's era. He's the dawn of Scottish football. I think, obviously, the number of league titles and cups and so on he won. The fact that he was the first British manager to manage a team to the European Cup. Obviously, the next season, Matt Busby, who was also Scottish, won with Manchester United. But in terms of career success, Jock Stein outmanages everybody in terms of success, and he was the first British manager to manage a European team, a European Cup winning team. Argument to say that Bill Shankly at Liverpool was a brilliant Scottish manager as well. Again, he didn't have the same number of titles and trophies and stuff, and obviously his Liverpool team as such never won the European Cup. It was the Bob Paisley team that followed on from the Bill Shankly era that won more and more things. Johnny Briggs, it's sad, but Calmack is past his best. We can't blame him. Well, for me, as the captain, as the leader on the pitch, as the focal point for Celtic's midfield, he does have a lot of responsibility, and thus should be one of the ones who is standing up and taking the blame. And however, the Boeing, if we hadn't had Johnson out, had signed the defender, had a strong midfielder, we'd have seen that through. The lads that came on were just off the rhythm with hardly any game time. All those things are potentially true. However, we were 3-1 down before we brought any substitutes on. So the players who started the game were where in those 15 minutes at the start of the second half, they failed to do their job, and the substitutes that came on didn't change things. But Casper Hu had a role in that team, and he didn't deliver. Lots of players didn't deliver. So maybe having Alistair Johnston at right back would have made a difference. I thought Colby Donovan played pretty well when he was on the pitch. I thought Dane Murray did okay when he swapped there briefly to be the right back. Then Ralston, I think Ralston was a weakness when he did come on. But I do agree, it's one of the difficulties at the start of the season is that I think pre-season friendlies are pointless, which is why maybe next year, because we'll be playing in the Champions League qualifiers, assuming that we win the league again this season, which I think we will do, maybe the fact that we'll be playing really meaningful games in July, maybe that actually gets Celtic properly organised to go through several rounds of qualifying, like we did in the 2016 season under Brendan Rodgers, starting with the Lincoln Red Imps, and then it was Astana, and then it was one of the Israeli teams in the final qualifying round. So maybe having meaningful, proper games where you play your first choice players from game one for the whole 90 minutes, rather than playing your first choice players mixed with some kids, mixed with some backup players, and you don't take any of the pre-season friendlies that seriously. I don't think that actually gets teams ready to play the first game of the season. So maybe the fact that we'll have lots of meaningful games in July because of the Champions League qualifiers, maybe that gets Celtic better organised. That will, however, mean Celtic have to get really organised at the end of this season so that everything is up and running and ready at the very start, end of June, start of July, for all the players to be super fit and super ready to start the season. The Boying, as a whole, Scottish football badly needs a revamped 16-team league. Get YouTube to supply the TV rights. We need to have excitement back and try not to rely so much on Europe every year. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's a lot of truth to that. One of the other things, and I'm not sure how it's allowed in terms of employment law and UEFA rules and SFA rules and so on. But for me, some form of system where a certain number of players within your starting 11 and substitutes in the bench have to be Scottish players or home trained players, so players that have come through your academy. Because I think there are far too many teams around Scotland in the Scottish Premier League, or Scottish Premiership rather, where there are players who are kind of humdrum players coming from lower leagues in England, some coming from lower leagues in Wales and Ireland and around Europe and stuff, who are taking the place of what should be Scottish players. I don't know what the rules and regulations are in terms of employment laws and UEFA rules and FIFA rules, etc., about whether Scottish Premiership or the Scottish Premier Football League could set a quota of having to have so many homegrown players, Scottish players, as part of a match day squad. Because at the moment, young Scottish players aren't really coming through, which is having, for me, a big impact on the Scottish Premier League, and it's having a big impact on the Scottish international side as well. And I do think something along those lines would be quite a positive thing to do. And I think your theory of getting YouTube or somebody like that involved with football, I think that would be a good idea as well. Because I do think Scottish football needs to be sold more and more to the world. J7 saying Netflix could get into the football streaming world. Yep. I think there's a lot of different theories. I think the power of money and the power of TV is already very, 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 very big in the game. The amount of money that English teams, German teams, Spanish teams, Italian teams get from their TV contracts is absolutely obscene, which is why teams like Brentford, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Sunderland, etc., are able to spend the amount of money on transfers and contracts that goes way beyond what Celtic can afford. And also because the league is so much more worldwide than the Scottish League, also players want to go and play for Brentford and Bournemouth and so on, because they'll be playing in the most televised league in the world, where there's the most world money in any football. The boying Neil Doncaster is a coward that this playing Rangers 5-6 times a year is tedious. I think unfortunately, kind of what I was coming back to, the power of Sky TV, who is the major TV contract money for Scottish football. They demand 4 Celtic Rangers matches every season because they can sell tons of advertising. They can sell that fixture to other countries in the world a lot better than it would be if they've only got 2 Celtic Rangers matches and Celtic playing against Wraith Rovers or Dunfermline twice a season, Celtic playing against, Dumbarton or Partick Thistle twice a year. There aren't many people in the corporate world or the TV world who want to see 2 Celtic Wraith Rovers, 2 Celtic Dunfermline, 2 Celtic Partick Thistle, 2 Celtic Hamilton games a season. However, the world does want to see 4 Celtic Rangers matches and cup finals and semi-finals and stuff involving those 2 teams. You're quite right, Martin. If all the Scottish teams had got through this evening, it would have really helped Scotland's coefficient. In the long run, that would help Celtic in terms of things like Champions League qualifying. Celtic have underperformed recent seasons. However, as you're kind of implying, Rangers did have the success of getting all the way to the final a few years ago of the Europa League. They got to the last 8 of the Europa League a few seasons ago as well. Those things did help Scotland's coefficient, which did help actually Celtic have 2 years in a row of automatic qualification. Next season is going to be 2 or 3 rounds to get into the Champions League. In some ways, it might be beneficial to Celtic. In other ways, it could again be Celtic just aren't ready at the start of the season, which probably implies at some point with a few months to go of this season, we need to know whether Martin O'Neill is staying or whether someone else is coming in to replace him. And if someone is coming in to replace him, Celtic in some way or other get that transition between O'Neill and whoever the new manager is in place, maybe around about March, April time, so that the new manager's got March, April, May to get used to his squad, March, April, May to start working with scouting and recruitment about which players are going to come in during the summer transfer window of 27 and which players are going to be moved on that summer. So whether O'Neill stays on, which I'd be happy enough to do if he's got the physical and mental and energy ability to keep going another season, I would be happy enough to do that. But I think we do need to have a certainty in January, February, March time as to who the Celtic manager is going to be for the 27-28 season. Good point, Sligo Boy. The SPFL is trying to replicate the 4-division model of England. England's obviously got a lot more teams than Scotland. There is a strong argument that Scotland could maybe go to three divisions, or have a bigger top division and smaller second and third and fourth divisions. I think there's a lot of different options, and I think having a bigger top league with fewer Celtic Rangers and fewer Celtic Hearts and Hibs games would be better, and a bit more variety. My fear is, though, that Sky Sports wouldn't want to pay for that. Johnny Briggs saying good run in Europa is over 25 million. Yep, if Celtic got all the way to winning the tournament, it would be along those lines. Celtic do get a parachute payment of having been in the Champions League qualifiers and being one of the 7 teams knocked out in the final qualifying round. They do get an extra €4 million to add to what they would have got to be in the Europa League already. So Celtic are already starting with, I think it's almost €9 million of prize money simply for having qualified for the Europa League because of the fact we're being parachuted from Champions League qualifier to Europa League qualifiers, Europa League group stage. Anyway, it is getting on into early Friday morning. So I think we need to probably start thinking about closing things down. James Smith, sell the contract to Premier Sports. I think the problem with Premier Sports is I don't think they've got the money. Well, they've not got the money. They've not got anywhere near the money that Sky Sports does. My understanding is that Premier Sports were in effect bought over by somebody else, and there's been sort of 2 or 3 different sort of ownerships of Premier Sports. Probably what Scottish football requires is a major player like Amazon or Netflix or Disney or someone like that, or ESPN, who are an American sports network, to come in and offer really big contracts to Scottish football and then market it more and more around the world, which would be the case obviously if it was on Netflix or on Amazon or Disney or ESPN from America. It could be much more global. Plus, they obviously those have all got a lot more money as well, and they could start challenging Sky Sports for bidding. Part of the reason that Sky Sports pays so much for English football is the fact that there are more and more competitors, so they've had to keep on upping their ante, their basic offer each new bidding cycle. They have to bid more and more, and then they also have had to share some some coverage with Amazon and some coverage with TNT Sports / HBO. Good point, actually, Kieran Allen. No European football for Rangers. Fans revenue halved. I think that's probably perfectly reasonable. They obviously are going to have no European money, so they're going to lose out on a lot of sponsorship, a lot of merchandising, a lot of corporate stuff. Plus, they're going to lose out on television money. Plus, they're going to lose out on prize money. So there is going to be a massive hole in the Rangers budget for the season, and a hole in the budget for Motherwell and Hibs as well. It's not big money for Hearts to be in the Conference League, but they will have the benefit of six European games, TV money, prize money, merchandising, sponsorship, corporate, all these things. And so I know the Europa League is kind of, well, it definitely is second best, but it still is actually quite a money spinner. So the money is about a half or more than a half less than it would be in the Champions League, but 20 million or so is still a really good pot of money to have. Not as good as 40 million, obviously, but still a good pot of money. Good point, actually. Wyoming CSC, the fact that they've gone out of Europe, missing out the Conference League. My suspicion is that Rangers were very much budgeting to be in the Europa League this season. Then I think second best, so they probably would have had to have adapted their budget because they're going to be in the Conference League, and obviously they've dropped out of the Conference League and they're absolutely nothing. So they're going to be missing a fair chunk of money that they probably had already budgeted for and maybe have already spent as well. Martin Ford D for Rich, Amazon making moves into football now. They could blow Sky out the sky if they were inclined to do so. They certainly have the money, as would a Netflix, as would a Disney, to challenge Sky and beat Sky to lots of contracts. Whether they see Scottish football as being worthwhile for them to invest in is another matter, but there would be a lot of positives to that. Yep, Pork Chop Express, Amazon Prime geared up for selling movies. Why not sell pay-per-view football? I think if football was pay-per-view, I think that would be negative for Scottish football. I think the fact that it is available for paying a monthly subscription to Sky or whomever it might be is a lot better than having the monthly subscription to watch most of the games, but then having to spend £20 to watch Celtic Rangers or pay £20 to watch the League Cup quarter-final or League Cup semi-final or whatever. I think that would be negative for Scottish football. So surprise. So Sligo Boys saying surprise result: Larne 0, Lincoln Imps 3, with Larne having been 2 up from the first leg. That was, when I looked at that as a fixture for tonight, I thought, well, that's a guaranteed relatively small team through to the Conference League, which is kind of what the Conference League is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be encouraging the lower leagues like Northern Ireland, Ireland, Wales, Iceland, etc., to have teams playing at the top level of European or a top level of European football. Very much agree. Wyoming CSC. Hope we bounce back on Saturday. Need a good performance. Both those are 1,000,000% correct. We need to bounce back on Saturday. I think we will bounce back on Saturday. I think we will have a good result on Saturday. I would guess a 2-3-0 win, something along those lines, and that would be a good Pork Chop Express, a football channel with a monthly subscription with access to any league worldwide is bound to be a topic for the future of the way football's going. I think that would be a brilliant idea. So, and certainly I hadn't really thought of it that way, but yes. So let's say, for the sake of example, Amazon or Netflix decides to do something like that and develops a contract with Scotland, England, Spain, France, Germany, etc., so that you spend, let's say, £30 a month, and then that gives you access to the top 10 leagues around the world or around Europe. That would be a brilliant idea. Maybe throw in Major League Soccer, maybe throw in J League for a few more pounds, etc. I think it's a brilliant idea. Maybe you should write to whoever runs Amazon, whoever his name is. Was it Jeff Bezos? Anyway, write to somebody. That's a brilliant idea. Wish I'd thought of that myself. Anyway, it's been great to have had you on as well, James Smith. Lots of opinions and discussion and chat and stuff back and forward, and kind of taking a cue from James Smith. I think it probably is on my clock 2 minutes to 1 in the morning, so I think it's about time that I got off to my bed. 4 hours of talking isn't isn't always that ideal. It's been, I thought, for the fact that we got knocked out of Europe in a rather demoralizing, dispiriting way. I'm certainly more cheerful now than I was 4 hours ago. So thank you very much to everybody who has cheered me up. Thank you very, very, very much for everybody who's taken a brilliant part in all the discussions, all the comment screens, etc. Thanks for those who voted to what they think Celtic is going to end up in the season. So thank you to absolutely everybody who has contributed. Thank you very much to everybody who's put stuff in the comments. As I say, we'll be doing another live stream next Thursday from 9 o'clock. I'm very sorry, Sligo Boy, if you've missed most of it. Thank you to you, YMCSC. Thank you very much to the boy. So thank you much to absolutely everyone, Kieran Allen, absolutely everybody, J7, etc. Everybody who's contributed. As I said, we'll be doing the same thing again next Thursday. We'll be doing some form of video previewing the Falkirk match, either late or sometime on Friday evening, or more likely Saturday morning, and then post-match review probably on sometime on Sunday. So do watch out for those, and then we'll then start talking about the end of the transfer window, start of who we're getting in the Europa League, all these sorts of things. So plenty of things to watch out for on the channel over the next few days for videos and stuff, and plenty of things for us to talk about next Thursday. So until next Thursday, thank you everybody who has contributed. See you all next week. Goodbye. Good luck, Celtic, in beating Falkirk on Saturday and bouncing back. And to you all, goodbye and hail, hail.